GEEGA, thank you so much for joining me tonight. So happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I noticed that my camera has flipped on its own, so let me fix that. In case any truthers in the chat notice that my eye patch is
Yeah, that's right.
Right. There we go. Hold on.
Haha,
It'll flip it for you. There you go.
Yes, we're good. Also, thank you, Rytho13, Terrace Fire Squad, and Uncreative4 for the follows. So, GEEGA, as is evidenced by people in the chat, a good number of the people here tonight are already quite familiar with you. But for anyone who might not be, if you could introduce yourself.
My name is GEEGA. I am a general from the underworld, and I specifically am in charge of all of the level 1 trash mobs. And that's it. I'm a mid-boss. I don't really have many responsibilities, so I decided to start streaming so that I can do something with my time.
Just as any good mid-boss should, because, I mean, if you're not fighting the hero, you're going to have free time on your hands.
Exactly. Not many protagonists these days.
Now, whether or not that's because your army is doing so well, or if just a bunch of people have also become streamers and retired from being heroes, we're still waiting for the survey results on that.
Correct, yeah. We'll see what happens.
Yes. But anyways, like I said, thank you so much for being here. And I suppose since we've already had a good number of the points redeems in chat, I suppose it feels like a appropriate place to start that for you, being a general and having all of your level 1 trash mobs is part of the flavoring, part of the character, but it's also something that's very integral to your stream and to your community as a whole. So if you could explain the factions themselves, but also I'm very curious as to how the factions came about. That is it something that was sort of an epiphany moment? Was it something that you were workshopping and trying to figure out, all right, I want to do something engaging, and that you eventually found yourself going in this direction? Please tell me about it.
Yeah, so to start off, within an army, you never have everyone thrown into one unit and then you just go. They're always separated out by either rank or usually multiple separators, right? Rank or division, which is specifically what they do, right? If you have more heavy infantry, if you have people in tanks, these are not going to be all mixed together. They're going to be separate. So I wanted to make sure that we were well organized. So I just came up with 3 different factions, and we sort them based off of where they come from or how they came to be. So either you are in creatures, which means you spawn in the overworld. You're monsters, which means you spawn in the underworld. This is like your first spawn. Or you're undead, which means wherever you died, you reanimated. So those are the 3 different, I see chat trying to be on their behavior. Those are the 3 different factions. And you can choose to be whatever you want to be. So if you are, a cute bunny VTuber and you don't want to be in creatures, you can decide that when you die, you can pledge your skeleton to me and you can join undead, and I'll just kind of take it in advance. And when you finally die, I'll accept your skeleton into the army. So there's a lot of wiggle room there. Or you could say, hey, when I die, I want to be reborn in the underworld and I want to be a shitty little imp or whatever you want. So you can kind of pick whichever. And some people pick because they really, really like the flavor of one of the factions, or they like the people that are in the faction, or sometimes they pick it because they're heavy RPers. They're like, I'm a demon succubus woman from the underworld, whatever. So they pick monsters, right? So you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And the idea was, I wanted to not necessarily to separate people that follow me into different groups. Most of the use of the Discord is not in like the separate
it's
channels.
a very united community as a whole. It's very like it's playful Harry Potter houses is sort of the way that I would do it as a one-liner, but not as divided as Harry Potter houses, because those are much more cliquey than you see in your factions.
Yeah. Instead, I wanted to just gamify things, because it's fun to watch a streamer, to be a fan of them, or to be like, whether you're friends with them, whatever it is, it's really fun to interact with the streamer. But for me personally, when I've watched other streamers, the thing I liked the most, or that I took away from it at the end of the day, was not just liking that streamer, but all the people in the community, because they all have Discords, they all have Twitter that other people interact on, all of that. And community management is a thing that I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to. They usually do some little thing like having a Discord or something, but I think that's the biggest value, right? As an individual viewer, as one person watching a streamer and being in their community, you're going to get the most value out of like making friends in that community or interacting with it in a way where you don't just feel like an amorphous blob of viewers. You feel like you have some sort of identity within there, and it at us up to a certain point, streamers can remember names and things about people who are in chat, but past a certain point, you kind of can't. And then I feel like the viewers start to feel like they lose their identity to the streamer, you know? And what do you do to make sure that people can still have that feeling without just saying, well, then I just won't grow and I'll just stay a small streamer, because you realistically can't do that. So for me, one of the answer to that was, okay, well, if I separate them into factions, regardless of how many of them there are, they can have their own faction identities and work together to affect point totals. And then there are 3 things for me to pay attention to, realistically. Yeah. And of course, I like to remember as many names as I can, especially with regulars. But like that gives you, even if you only interact a little bit and you're not in chat very often or you don't talk, it gives you a way to feel like, okay, I contributed though. And like, not necessarily that I've been noticed, but I've done something that gets noticed, Yeah,
it's the group effort mentality of I did my part, I helped out my team. Also, by the way, Floop, send that again. It is !GEEGA creatures. You had just creature, so it's plural. Make sure you get those points. But yeah, so I really like it because it's one of the things that obviously as soon as you tune in, you notice those numbers at the bottom bar and you notice all right, I'm looking in the redeems. What can I do with my channel points? Oh, dailies, what's this? And it's very fun of just having that, but also, the classic thing of mobile games or games as a whole of having your dailies to do. So I very much enjoy that flavor, and I appreciate it from just a community management perspective. Now, bit of trivia. Do you know what faction I'm part of?
I want to say you joined Undead. I'm trying to remember what color your name is in the server. It was not I don't know.
It's a trick question. A good interviewer is always neutral. I'm not part of a faction.
God damn it.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Talked in the server? Let me see. Because it was something I really like to do is when people join the server. I like to check after stream, and I look in the gateway channel, which is my doorway, right? And I look and I see who's passed through the gates, and I check their name colors after the stream, and I try to see who
all right,
what.
How has the balance of power shifted today?
Yeah, exactly. I always like to check up on it, and I like to check the total number of people that are new and are active, as best I can tell, at least in each faction, just to keep an eye on it. They're saying neutral.
I've incurred the wrath of the factions. Yeah. Oh no, by trying to stay neutral, I've made enemies of all of them.
No, you have 2 friends. One of my friends mods, Iggy, and one of my friends, Minky, another VTuber. The 2 of them I put in this extra thing, and they're called neutral idiots.
I am proud to be a neutral idiot.
Oh yeah.
So, my God. For the ideation of it, was it something that came to you really quickly, or was it something that you were, actively trying to think of something and you found yourself moving in that direction? Is there a particular story, or is it just, I thought of it and we're all good?
I thought of it really quickly, because
sometimes the best ideas are just that fast.
Yeah, it took a while to flesh out how I wanted it to work, and a lot of the ideas of how I want it to work are still not implemented. They're still, being worked on. It's in its really, really baby phase now. But
the concept of the factions was quick, and the systemic build out of it is still a work in progress.
Right. Correct. Yeah, there's a lot to come with it. I just right now it is just a simple identity thing, and I think everyone's having a really good time with it as is. So I'm glad. I was kind of worried when I first started out. I was like, is this enough? Does this translate well, or does this get boring after 1 week, Yeah. And it's been doing really well. Just honestly, even if I didn't give a prize to the winning faction each month, people still just like having the title of like, ooh, we won this month. Like, even if they gave them nothing, So I'm glad they're so entertained by it.
Yes, and like you said, you actually have prizes that they're allowed to sort of make a demand of their faction has done enough to get the attention of their great leader. And you look down on them from on high and say, what is your wish? Of the
Correct.
wishes that you have received, what is the most ridiculous or memorable that you've gotten?
A lot of the time I've had to guide them. And I say, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know, what should we do? You know?
We didn't think we'd get this
what
far.
What do you want to do? Yeah. So a lot of the time it's been like, you know, like a watch party, right? And we sit around. And one of the times we sat around and originally we planned a movie night, and we all, it was the Creatures faction, and we met up in Discord at the time specified to, we just called it a watch party. And when I got there, I said, okay, what do you want to watch? And they were like, I don't know. You know, no one had any specific ideas. They just wanted to watch something. So I put ideas on the table, and it was a lot of movies and shows. And then at one point I said, what about old Key and Peele videos? Like, what if we just watch like their shorts on YouTube? And then we just did that for hours and talked over them. And it was really, really fun. And so that one was pretty memorable because it was very much so not like a planned movie that we were silent during, you know, it was just like a hangout, and that was nice. And then the other one is definitely, like Rice had just said, the Bone Zone emote on the desk. So Undead wanted Bone Zone, you know, which is the dancing skeleton. They wanted him put on a little trophy base and then on my desk. So on my desk, there's permanently a dancing Bone Zone emote.
Hey, that's a pretty powerful wish of that. They have forever changed your layout of, you know, even if it only was this 1 month, that legacy will live on forever.
Yeah, exactly. And I would love... I can't do it with my current background. I would like to maybe adjust either this one or a new one so that I can have 4 different versions of the same background, which is a plain one and then one where it's decorated for each of the factions, maybe in their colors.
Sort of to celebrate or something like that.
Right. You know, each one has like a pixel art mascot, so that everywhere, you know, whatever it is. And then whoever won that month, I stream the next month's worth of community days, which are the Sunday streams, with that background. That's something that I want to do eventually, but that's contingent on, you know,
being able to get those access.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're willing to share some of the ideas that you have for the future of Faction Wars, what are things that you have in mind, whether they be in active development or if it's just, you know, this is sort of a pie in the sky long shot that may or may not happen one day, really anything at all of where you see or want the future of this system going?
The long term thing that I want to do, that I guess we'll do piece by piece, is I want everyone to have their own profile, and I want everyone to be able to build themselves out, so to put their stats actually on themselves. Right now, if you join
individual users, not faction based, that this is getting more granular then.
Yeah, just have one more level below the factions of the individuals. And I want everyone to be able to, probably just on Discord, and then if I could, not to get into the nitty gritty, but linking your Twitch and Discord to something that you validate on your own through your user settings. So I have to, 1, rely on people to do that. And then 2, if they do stuff on Twitch and they earn points through redeems, I can't really validate that they did that on Discord, you know? So
that way. So then there's also the matter of someone can see, all right, I have claimed this many points for the monster faction over the weeks, months, years that I have been in the mob army, and then it can become sort of a point of personal pride on top of the faction pride, and that you can sort of see the literal and figurative veterans.
Exactly. So right now I have like a little leaderboard that you can use just in Discord. It only works for Discord. Because like I said, rolling up the points between the two is going to take a bit more. It's possible, but it's going to take a bit more.
That requires tech.
Yes, it's going to require people logging in and validating themselves on a website, and like, you know what I mean. But that'll take time. But my end goal is to have that be a thing, and then roll up your dailies and all your offerings, earned points, and all this stuff into one on your profile, so that you as a user, you have an ID and it remembers that this person has done this much, and maybe it can give you breakdowns of what you earned per month and when you were most active and these sorts of things, and leaderboards. And then once I have that sort of thing where they're kind of validated between both platforms, then what I want to do, or maybe I do this first just on one platform, not really sure which yet, but I want people to be able to play a chat-based game at first chat base. We'll see what we do with later. But I want them to be able to have their own profile to be able to dump their stats in, because everyone has very basic stats when they start out in the mob army. And I want them to be able to fight protagonists with me on stream. That's I won't go too much further into it, but I want
I've seen
to happen.
sort of similar things where usually it'll be like cats or some other random thing, and that you can do like command fight, and that I've seen battle royale type things with user icons, or ones where you can use like a jump command and that like stars will fall and you can collect those. So maybe blending one of those systems with your own. I don't know if any of them are inherently compatible, but even if they aren't, I can envision the type of system that I think you're considering, and that'd be really cool. Just, I assume would you then have all the mobs just sort of scuttling around the bottom of the screen?
I don't know if I would do that, because that's very the stream avatars is the one specifically that has them on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, and they do have some, although not everyone uses the mini games, and I don't know why, but they do have a lot of mini games that you can use in stream avatars. And they have that sort of system where there's a little panel below the stream that you can like outfit your character with, and you can gamble in the in the chat, like roll for coins and then get coins and then go buy outfits and all that kind of stuff. And I think there are ways that I can roll. Not all of that is necessary, but I can roll some of those ideas into a custom thing where it's more not so much about decorating yourself and seeing yourself on screen, but just having an identity and being able to influence points better for being stronger, So having an actual RPG where you can affect your own stats, you can maybe affect your level, and from there, your contributions are weighed a little more heavily. That's something that I want to do. And that way we reward the people who are longtime viewers. And maybe each month you get knocked back a little bit. You only keep some. There are a lot of ways to design different game systems
to keep things balanced and whatnot, because you want to make sure that the newcomers still feel like they can make a meaningful contribution. That it's not if I'm not this longtime viewer, then there's no point to it. But the idea of still being able to give the veterans that type of reward and appreciation for being around so long, while still making sure that newcomers are always feeling empowered and welcome. That it's definitely a balance to strike, but I don't think it is an impossible balance to achieve.
Yeah. So there's a lot that could be done with these different systems, and how you could do a lot with game design. And it's I would love, what Dubers is saying. We always say to each other, turn on PvP right now.
I was just kidding. It was like new kids. We'll be fair,
hey,
sure.
Yeah, those are all the veterans are here, but that's the sort of thing that I would really like people to be able to do. Is I would love for them to be able to challenge people in other factions, or for factions to challenge other factions for points, or maybe they come together and fight something off, and whoever does the most damage, gets something extra. All that kind of stuff. There are all these different like game modes that I have in my head, and just the base system needs to be built for it to work on top of. But I think it's really possible. It's just time consuming. But I want to do so much with it, because like I said, I think it's so important to let everyone in my community have an identity beyond just like, oh yeah, I watch GEEGA, and that's it, So I really like
what you're doing right now, even if it's not where you want it to be ultimately, that you're still doing a lot more than the average streamer. So it's cool that you have this extra layer, and it goes beyond flavoring, and that's the whole point of it. That it really is it's a tacky word perhaps, but engaging, and it has that extra level of fun to keep people coming back to the stream, keep people coming back to the Discord, and actually making a community. It's one thing that I've said before on the show. I did actually community management professionally for several years, and moved away from it when I realized that I did not particularly enjoy it. There's a reason that there is not a Vtuber Talk Discord server. So, but at the same time, that gives me so much appreciation for the people who are able to do community management and do it well.
Yeah, that's something that I won't be humble about. I pride myself on. I think I'm really good at this sort of thing, and I want to take my knowledge that I have of this sort of stuff and use it in the right way. besides just, showing up in the Discord and going, "Good morning, everyone. How are you today?" and leaving it at that.
Yeah.
There's so much more you could do. So I'm trying to do more when I can, when I have the time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of games as a whole, you play many games. You're, as many people
Mhm.
are, a variety streamer. I think the first stream of yours that I saw was when you were playing Breath of the Wild. I can't remember
Yeah.
if I was rated into you by someone or if I stumbled
Mm.
upon you independently, but that's the first game that I have a particular memory of you playing, and it was relatively early on. And obviously, it's a very long game, so it was fun to
Mhm.
tune in and just see you going through that. But
Right.
you were very engaged with the chat throughout, and that's one of the things that sort of drew my eye to your one eye earlier on.
Yeah, it's yeah, I actually just finished it on stream last week, I want to say. I think it was, yeah, last week. I had put it down for a little bit and then came back to it, and that game did a lot for my stream in general. Because number one, there aren't a lot of people streaming in the category. So even with not a million viewers, I still was really high up. So I think I was getting recommended to everyone. So all these VTubers that I knew from Twitter, but who had never caught my streams, were showing up and they were like, "Oh, you were recommended to me. Can't believe I'm not following." And they started following, and so that there were like a
Mm,
lot of people that noticed me a bit more from that. They already kind of knew who I was, but they didn't check out my content yet.
yeah.
So a lot of people came in from that, and then it, subsequently got a lot of raids, and my viewership essentially doubled from the month before when I was not playing Breath of the Wild to when I was. My viewership completely doubled. I went from like 30 to 35, I think like 35 average the month before, to in the 60s, 70s the next month. And I was already on a really good upward trend from that, but it was slower, and then
Yeah.
I swear to God, it was just Breath of the Wild, and that
I
just like
feel like
did
most
it.
people have
Mhm.
some sort of turning point as a
Right.
streamer that there's no consistency to where, when, or why. But
Mhm.
I've found that most people can usually point something and say, "This is where I noticed things really started spiking." And uh, obviously, I am one of the people that found you through Breath of the Wild, so
Yeah.
I can't say from full experience, but it certainly sounds like that may have been a turning point for you. And it seems like
Right.
things have really persisted because you,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, actually put down Breath of the Wild for a while and have
Right.
been playing other games, and people are still showing up. That I was in your just chatting stream yesterday where you were going over the Nintendo
Oh, yeah.
Direct and then like just food videos and well,
Mhm.
it's a different Zelda game now. Now you're doing Wind Waker with crowd control, and
Yeah,
people are still showing up. But you've said before
absolutely.
that you enjoy sort of playing around with the Twitch meta and being aware of that. Was
Mhm.
the choice of Breath of the Wild a meta choice, or was it just a happenstance one?
Yeah, it was completely strategic. I'll be really open about that. I would never strategically choose a game that I wouldn't like to play. So no matter what, everything I play is stuff that I would either really like to play or would really like to try out. But out of those things, I'll always pick the stuff that I think is likely to do best. Always.
Yeah,
And then have one or two things that are maybe more just for me. So right now I'm also playing Mega Man Battle Network 6. And I know that's kind of a
that
just for
one
me
makes
game.
me very happy, honestly.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love the Battle Network series.
Right, and that's how I feel. I'm a longtime net battler. I'm someone who really, really loves the series. So for me, that was kind of a me choice. It still did well. You can stream in the retro category, and meta-wise, it's kind of okay that way. But I do a mix of these things. I always make sure that once a week, one of the games I'm playing is something that's kind of, it does a little better with the Twitch meta. And I think this is one of those things that a lot of people get wrong when they're streaming, and when they're early on, right, and they're very small and they're trying to grow. They're like, I don't know how to grow. Once I get that like first 15 viewers, like a lot of people get stuck there, and they don't really know what to do. And honestly, it's purely playing the category game, and picking games that are in this sweet spot of not too many big streamers past you streaming them, but also not completely dead as a
Yeah.
category.
And also something
There's
that you
a
still
spot.
enjoy, that I think it's perfectly healthy
Yeah,
to play the Twitch meta and to
right.
make strategic, informed decisions. But
Mhm.
like you said, you're not gonna go deep down the meta to the point where you're doing something that you don't enjoy, because no
Right.
one's going to want to watch a stream when the streamer's not going to have a good time, and the streamer themselves are just,
Exactly.
they're not going to want to do that for hours on end. That's the fastest way to just burn out in general
Oh,
of
yeah.
doing things that you don't like. But the idea of, okay, I know what I like and I'm open to whatever these things, and let's make an informed decision out of things I know I'm gonna like anyway. And I think that's really
Mhm.
smart.
Yeah. I think it's hard to figure out what that sweet spot is for each person because it's not going to be the same for everyone. For me, Breath of the Wild worked partially because of timing, right? They just talked about Breath of the Wild 2 before I started
Yeah.
streaming it, which is kind of why I jumped on it. I love the game itself. Like I love Zelda games and everything. So of course I was going to have really good interest in it. And I have played it before, although I'd said it a lot on stream. I just didn't remember anything from it and I didn't beat it. And like, I kept picking it up when it came out. I would pick it up and play it for a day a lot and then put it down and then come back to it 3 weeks later. And I would really enjoy my time playing it each time, but I wouldn't remember what I did
It is a
previously.
big game, and it's just, there's
Yeah.
so many things that if you're not playing it super regularly, you're
Mhm.
not going to remember, all right, in this
Yeah.
vast map, where the heck was I?
Exactly. There was so much that kind of fell out of my brain between each chunk of me playing it the first time. So I gave up on it at one point and I didn't beat it. And I figured, no, I'll play it on stream way later at some point. And then I finally did it. I got to have it back like a fresh playthrough, like I
Hmm.
got to, it was like, I understood a lot about the combat system already and items and stuff. Like a lot of that I remembered, but the lore, where to go, all the storyline, like that was just completely not in my brain. So that was really nice because then I got to play it truly like a first playthrough. Although I didn't use the first playthrough tag, I still got a lot of people coming in asking if it's the first one, and I'd try to, as fast as possible, explain just that and say basically yes it is.
Yeah.
And it was nice because in the category, everyone was speed running or they were doing like fun physics tech. They
Hmm.
weren't just playing the game.
Yeah, because it's an older
So I think
game
that,
now, so it's
yeah.
not the meta in the sense that everyone is playing it. And if anything, I
Mhm.
usually feel like if it's a brand new release, that's probably as anti-meta as you can get, because that's when it's going to be
Mhm.
the most oversaturated.
Yeah, I think it depends on the game. But that's true for a lot of them when they first come out. It's good to come back to games a little while later, or if you're going to play right when it comes out, you do it within the first like few days.
Yeah,
And then after that, you either
then it's
continue the
gonna.
playthrough because it's a banger and you love it, or you go, okay, I tried it, and you and you leave it after that first day.
Yeah, I suppose the exceptions to the oversaturation rule are going to be when it's something like a battle royale game or a game that
Mhm.
other people can participate in, something like
Right.
Fall Guys or Among Us, things of that nature.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So it's like I don't know. There's so many nuances to the Twitch meta that people don't really get, and I still am like figuring new things out constantly. But that's a lot of my early, not early, like mid range growth. I don't know. I started streaming in February, so this was like May. I started doing really well, and I think I was playing Breath of the Wild in April. I can't remember. End of April or early May is around when I started, and that's kind of, so I guess it's sort of mid mid streaming career for me, right? Um,
Midstream, mid boss.
yeah, yeah, that's what I popped off. But yeah, it's been going really well, and because on top of that, I didn't play Breath of the Wild every day. I still make sure that every day that I stream, I'm not playing the same thing that I did the last time, and I try
Yeah.
to switch it up because if I play the same thing all the time, I'm gonna get truthers that come in for the game and not for me, right? And as a
Hmm.
variety streamer, that's terrible because then as soon as you finish that game and you switch to a new
Then you
one,
lose
all those
them.
people, right? They leave. So for me, not only was it playing the category meta and picking Breath of the Wild, smartly, but also making sure I mixed in other stuff and new stuff constantly, so that if those people did check me out for a second day in a row, I was more likely to retain them because that seemed normal on my channel if they looked back at like my past broadcasts and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of things went into the Breath of the Wild choice and what I was streaming at the time.
Do you have any other meta
Mm.
plays or strategies that you're particularly proud of and willing to share?
Oh yeah, a few. Yeah, I'll share. One is just ingrained in me. The way I look is pretty unique for a VTuber, especially from afar when I'm in a thumbnail and I'm really small. I look really unique because my color scheme is not very similar to a lot of people's other color schemes. They tend to be more bright or like natural tones. So the fact that I have all these dark tones and then suddenly like really light colored hair, it's just like a color palette that not many VTubers have. And then also the eye patch is like a huge thing. And I just look really different in this like tiny little thumbnail. And that, I think, I'm
Like,
pretty
now
sure
that you
makes
say
people
it, it
click
makes
on it.
perfect sense. But I
Mhm.
legitimately did not know that
Yeah.
level of strategy had gone into your design. That
Well,
I
I didn't.
figured, all right, you like the design, of course, that
Yeah, yeah.
everyone has to like their design on some level. But
Mhm.
um, I've never heard of someone, I'm sure you're not the only one, but you're the first person
Yeah.
I've heard say, I deliberately manipulated, at the very least, your color palette to
Yes.
be particularly unique.
Right. And what I first did was everything that I chose was just what I liked, and then I just tweaked it bit by bit to kind of then fit that
Mm,
meta. So everything was baseline, just what I liked, to
yeah.
start off with. This is just how I
Yeah,
want to
as
look.
usual, it
But
always has to come from a place of true enjoyment, and then
right,
you
right.
can tailor things and
Hmm.
make subtle strategy decisions from there without
Yeah.
betraying yourself.
Exactly, exactly. So you always do like a round one, a concept of anything you're gonna do is completely for you. And then a round two of polish on top of that should then be tailored for viewers or whatever else you're doing. That's just the very plain, simple method to literally anything as a streamer, whether it be your game choice or, what your stream setup's gonna look like, your overlays, all those things. So yeah, for me, that's the big thing was in a thumbnail, I look really unique. So that's one of the kind of strategies, although that's you can't really change that up every stream. That's
Not
just how you
quite.
look,
That is a
Mhm.
very base level strategy decision, but at the same time, it's something that decision
Mhm.
hypothetically will be paying off in perpetuity. That just
Right, right.
every time you're live, every time that your thumbnail is put alongside a bunch of other thumbnails,
Mhm.
that that difference will stand out, and that even
Right.
if you're not changing it, that the payoff is constant.
Exactly. And then that's a huge one. And then another one that kind of is similar, it'll be a thumbnail thing again. Um I have this redeem, one of the redeems on my channel is called GEEGA, right? And I just become huge. I just get really close to the camera and I become huge. That's it.
Oh
So
god,
the
and that
redeems
makes you
are
stick
kind of
out in
like
the
that.
thumbnails of when someone Oh
Yes.
my god.
Yeah. So then
I
my
never thought of
thumbnail
it from
is
that way.
me
I thought it was
being
like,
huge.
people
Yep.
have redeems of, make me do a silly thing, or,
Right.
I've even seen some people that have big and small redeems,
Yeah.
but I've never heard of someone saying, I'm including this redeem, not just because I think my community would find it amusing, but
Yeah.
also for strategic decisions
Mhm.
beneath that all.
Yeah, yeah, and it as a baseline, it was again one of those things where I just said that would be funny and added it as a
Yeah.
redeem, and it's something that actually chat shows with me on one of my first streams.
Oh, I didn't know
We
that.
Yeah, all of my current redeems are things that we spoke about together. I had one of my really, really early chatting streams that just sat around and talked about, "Hey, what redeems should I have?" I think it was before I had affiliate, and I was streaming, a bunch in 1 week to get affiliate,
Mhm.
and I was asking them, "What do you want?" And I had like, what, 10 viewers or something. And I was like, "What redeems do you want?" And Bika was in there. Um, so it was just kind of something that I chose together with chat. And then over time, not even over time, pretty early on, I realized, oh, this is really good because then the whole thumbnail thing.
Yeah, I do remember you
So I liked it. I
saying,
kept it. Mhm.
it was at some point in the last week or 2, I think, that
Yeah.
you actually made a point of saying, "Hold on, I wanna wait to make sure that the thumbnail has switched before going out of Biga," and
Yeah.
it should have occurred to me then, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, she's being a bit more cognizant of it now." I didn't realize that it was, all the way that far back.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's when I do the Bika redeem, I leave it on for a long time, not because of the thumbnail, but because I truly am just
Just
into what
forgetting.
I'm doing. Yeah, because you've noticed when I stream,
Oh, yeah.
I talk and I don't shut up and I just keep going and going, And so at some point it occurs to me, oh shit, the redeem's up because it's supposed to be for 5 minutes.
Yep.
But 5 minutes is long enough for one guaranteed thumbnail tick. Yeah, right. Like one change.
Yeah.
So it's the amount of time is designed to, at least give me 5 minutes worth of my thumbnail looking like
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
basically. And then after that, I don't really care at that point, like, what size I am. But But if I forget and I leave myself huge, I kind of get a benefit from it, right? From
Yeah,
from
it's like,
having my thumbnail be my huge face.
oh no. Anyway,
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't want to leave it on for forever, but when I forget, I'm like, okay, well, you know what? It's fine. At least the thumbnail looks good.
yeah. Also, thank you, Rocker66X and Endeno Sheru for the follows. So when it comes to Legend of Zelda, obviously you're on, well, I would have to assume this isn't your second Zelda game, but it's at least the second Zelda game that you've played recently. And you've said that you really enjoy the games as a whole, but also that you enjoy Ganondorf as a villain. And I'm very curious, do you have a particular favorite iteration of Ganondorf, whether it be in design, motivation, or just any sort of aspects of him? That I suppose your design, I don't think it's blatantly meant to take cues from Ganondorf, that it's very just, Dark Army standard sort of, but you do have a vague resemblance to Ganondorf, and it seems that you admire the man and his work. So tell me a bit about your favorite Ganondorf things.
I love Ganondorf to death. One of my most favorite characters of all time. And I've mentioned to you before, but in general, whenever I like characters from games or movies or whatever, I tend to really like the villains. I just always have. So Ganondorf has always been one of my favorites. And I really, in particular, just like the way he looks in Smash. And in Smash, they have a few variations of his costume, but he tends to look kind of like the Ocarina of Time version of himself, right? But they add like a different cape and they make him a little fancier because, it's not the 90s anymore.
Yeah,
so
you have more polygons to work with.
Exactly. And he looks so regal, in that one. He specifically, he looks regal with his cape. It actually looks kind of like a carpet, like it has the weird fringe on the ends. It looks like he took a red carpet and put it on his shoulders. But then what he's wearing in front of the cape, what he's wearing on his body is just like standard armor that looks like he could fight in, which is really similar to how I'm designed, right?
Yeah.
I've got this little cape and stuff that like maybe isn't the most practical, but then if you look at my full body design, like I've got side cutouts for maximum kicking action, and that kind of stuff. So I really like his design in particular. And then I love the idea of villains that keep coming back, and that there's some sort of either a curse or a prophecy or whatever it is, but they'll always be back,
Yeah, and it was fun seeing in Skyward Sword them establishing this lore, because obviously at the time that Skyward Sword came out, Legend of Zelda was past its 20th anniversary. It was somewhere between 20 and 25, and we as the players had already accepted, all right, Ganondorf just comes back. He is a force of nature one way or the other, but it was cool to have that moment with Demise where he said, I will be back every generation to hunt you down, to torment you and your ancestors, and sort of have that, I remember I shivered a bit when I read that. I was like, oh, dang, wait, this is the moment. This is the promise.
Yeah. It's great. I really like that sort of thing, because I don't know, a lot of people when they write villain characters in games or movies or shows, they make them really shallow, and like they don't give them much purpose. But no one would be that bad or do those things unless they were either completely crazy, which a lot of villains aren't. They try to make them seem not as crazy, right? Or they have like some really intense purpose that they need to fulfill. So in this case, they gave him a really good purpose that makes sense, and you're like, okay, well, that's why he comes back and he's hell-bent on doing this every time, is this ancient reason.
And I feel like it sort of gets better with age, because in the start it's just, all right, Demise is the essence of destruction and evil, and it's just at that point it is probably its shallowest. But then you add on, all right, this is a natural force that has then focused its gaze on a particular kingdom, on a particular person and their lineage. And then as we go throughout the games, Ganondorf doesn't really get to have a ton of development in every game, that he's always sort of just that creeping perpetual evil in the background that you really only get to see at the end game. And but the difference is you see his influence everywhere, that all of the just spawning monsters have, whether it be some vague resemblance or just that their sources have imagery or iconography that harkens back to Ganondorf, that sense of, all right, even if I am not fighting Ganondorf in person in this moment, I am fighting Ganondorf's forces, and that
Right.
this is Ganondorf's influence. And it's sort of, he receives development through all of his minions in a way,
Mhm.
because even if you don't get to have these deep conversations and figure out all the motivations, that you can sort of see his methodology, I suppose,
Yeah.
in just the game's design itself. And it allows you as the player to sort of fill in the gaps in an unspoken way, which isn't usually done in games. That
Mhm.
usually some games have really, really good writing with their villains and get to have this deep, deep lore with great conversations and character development that are super nuanced.
Right.
Others just sort of ham-fisted, and I am evil, I do evil, and it's trying to do
Yeah.
lore and doesn't land. And Ganondorf is, I think, a beautiful example of executed minimalism.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's like his brand is everywhere. When you see a monster spawn, right? They have like a certain type of smoke that pops out right when they spawn, when they
Yeah.
appear. And that smoke is also going to be used in that game when you fight him, for example, at the end. Every little thing, or they'll have symbols of whatever ancient culture he comes from in that particular game, and then they'll have that on the enemies or on shields that they're carrying or in their little dungeons that they're in and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like his army. I really like that because a lot of game bosses, the one guy shows up and he keeps following you everywhere and he's hell bent on beating you up, but he's an individual, and that's it. That's just, like you just keep running into this guy and like two of his cronies. But in this case, it's really like this whole operation of him and all of his influence, and you need to get through all of that to finally get to him, which I think
Yeah.
is not to say it is realistic, but it's a more realistic version of how this sort of thing would work, right? Like someone would use their powers that are at their disposal of being able to create monsters or turn things in. And usually it's like in the games, it's like he turns things into monsters that normally would have been harmless creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's more realistic, right? That you'd fight through an entire army's worth of stuff for a whole game and then finally get to him. That's kind of how it would work, I would think. So I really like the way they have him designed. And then he has very little personality that they give him. He has very few lines and dialogue. I think actually Wind Waker is one of the ones where he gets like some of the most dialogue
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get to see a good glimpse of his personality through that just with a couple of lines, and you could see he is a person with his own personality, but knowing the lore, you realize that his purpose and what he's doing, everything comes from Demise, right? Comes from all of that. So he's just a really cool, I don't know, he's just the coolest villain. I like him a lot. And he's in like my top 5 best bad guys.
Do you have a favorite Ganondorf fight?
Ooh, oh man, I don't know.
I'll let you think because I do. I adore Twilight Princess's final boss sequence. That
Mm,
is, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played it. Game's been out for 10ish years, so statute of limitations is up. After the first 2 phases, so you have possessed Zelda, which is its own sort of disturbing. It's like, oh gosh, it's the princess, the love interest, the person that you're trying to protect. You now have to risk bodily harm to them, and it's a very tense, disturbing moment. And then you get Beast Ganon, this the big pig himself, and you defeat Beast Ganon, and Midna sacrifices herself. Hyrule Castle explodes, and you are teleported out, and you think, okay, wow, heroic sacrifice, and Hyrule Castle's destroyed. The game's over. Smoke clears. What do you mean Ganondorf is on a horse rearing up, crushing Midna's mask? And that moment of, oh crap, it's not
so good.
over.
And that's something I always loved about his fights in general, was he always had phase 2, right, where he becomes big pig Ganon,
But that's
like
the thing
the
of just,
classic.
there was the phase 2 there, and you think, all right, phase 2 is
Yeah.
it, and then it
Right.
goes to 3 and then 4, and just, for me, that is the ultimate Ganondorf battle. That one-on-one in Twilight Princess, where it is you two clashing swords and having that final blow moment with, it's literally the first special move that you learn in the game, the finishing blow. and being able to use it one last time and
Yeah.
just have that moment. So
I think,
that's the one that stands out for me.
I agree with you that I think it's the best one. I'm gonna say my favorite was actually the Ocarina of Time fight. And I think
Very
it's
fair. Very fair.
purely
It's a good fight.
it's a good fight. And I think it's particularly because in Ocarina of Time they gave him a lot more personality and a
Yeah.
lot more individual identity outside of being a Ganon, vessel. He was
Mhm.
Ganondorf, and he himself had a lot of legend behind him as an individual man,
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely can see that
I
because
liked
you were
that.
mentioning that Wind
Mhm.
Waker is one of the places where he gets the most lines, and I was going to say
Yeah.
it's really Wind Waker and Ocarina where
Mhm.
he gets that characterization. It's just that's the
Yeah.
only one where you actually see him
Mhm.
pretending to be someone or something that he is not. That he's
Yeah, yeah.
impersonating this advisor, this other character,
Mhm.
and you have the actual background of his birth, and
Right.
and you find out that at least in this particular incarnation, that his birth is
Mhm.
almost messianic in a way.
Right, right. Yeah, they gave him a really I think maybe when they made Ocarina of Time, they were planning to keep doing this with him, and then they kinda went a different route, and they were like, "No, we'll focus more on Ganon than Ganondorf," you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, they really focus on him himself as, yeah, like a prodigy child that grew up and, was gonna be like the savior of his people, which is why when you go out to the desert, they seem to be down with Ganondorf, and
Yeah.
everything. They're really proud of him, and he's like, he's a really important part of their culture, and they even make nods to that in Breath of the Wild. They talk about back in the day there was some guy, who was part of their culture that
Yep.
did bad things,
A
right? And
descendant of the
they're referring
Gerudo.
to right, and you're like, oh, they're referring to that individual Ganondorf,
Hmm.
like that vessel. So it's nice because they gave him an individual personality the way Link is a different Link every time. You're carrying the spirit of the hero, or you're simply you've got courage, right? And you're getting a piece of the Triforce, and that's enough. But you're always part of that prophecy, and I like that they have mirrored. Well, okay, there's always a person also who's part of that prophecy that Ganon resides in.
Yeah.
So I like that they really made that strong in Ocarina of Time. I One thing I didn't like about Breath of the Wild is that they didn't have a Ganondorf. They just had Calamity Ganon, and he was just Ganon
Yeah.
for me. He was
Yeah,
just
that's
like
true.
people, right? And maybe they'll do something in Breath of the Wild too, where they
Yeah,
talk about why
that
he
first
is like
trailer
that.
certainly looks like a vessel.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So in this case, when you get to the final fight, people saw me do on stream, so it's not a spoiler, but you get to the final fight and he's just like in a cocoon thing, and it's just
Yeah.
Ganon, it's just evil force, evil spirit, and he's just kind of sealed there, and you just need to like reseal him fully, he's
Hmm.
like partially held back. And that was really interesting because every other game, he's always been like
He's
part
had
of
at
some
some
goo.
point, at some
Yeah.
point at least for a moment, has had a human form in pretty
Right,
much every other
right.
game, I think, except for
And
maybe
then
like the
he,
first when it's always the pig form. But even in
yeah,
this one, just at least in
right.
those, the pig was still vaguely humanoid, that it was
Yeah,
bipedal and whatnot. But
yeah.
not this
And
time.
and
It's
in
just
this one, yeah, he was
that
just like
blobbing, hulking mass, and then you get the
yeah,
pig
goop.
form in the end. But just
Mhm.
that was certainly the most disturbing version of Ganon that I can
Oh,
think of.
yeah.
Of just
Right. It
that
just
is a
had a beating
horror.
heart. Uh-huh, uh-huh, and I liked that. I liked that they turned him to just some weird eldritch being. It had some giant eye on it, and it was just you couldn't tell if he was, like, gelatinous or liquid or
Or
gaseous or what
just
he was, but he was a
like
mix.
fleshless muscle and
Yeah,
organs. Like it felt like a
yeah.
Resident Evil creature, honestly.
Mhm. And I liked that because if he didn't have a human form, what would he look like? Probably like that, right? When you think about what Demise was,
Yeah,
it would make sense that he was just kind of like energies.
this grotesque being.
Yeah, yeah. So I did really like his design. I missed like the mysterious man from the desert coming in and being a
Hmm.
bad guy. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
missed that because I really like that about him, right? Because Link is always a descendant of the same race every time.
yeah,
Every game you even at the beginning of Ocarina of Time, you find out, oh no, you're actually one of these people. You're not one of these forest
yeah.
beings.
And even
It's
if
like part of
Link
it.
isn't necessarily human, that he resembles
Yeah,
human, that you as the player are able to identify with him on a
right.
pretty base level, and the ability
Mhm.
to do that with a villain gives that extra level of connection and
Yeah.
that Link, that Link was missing in this particular version.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just the one thing I was like, oh, that could have been better. But either way, he's still one of my most favorite villains, and every iteration they do of him is still good. I still love Calamity Ganon. Like the pig fight at the end. The fight was okay. The fight itself was okay.
Yeah, the fight was okay, but
it's too easy.
it was up there with the best of them in terms of how cinematic it was.
Yeah. It did its job in giving you the right feelings, you know, when you were playing through it. So I was down with it. I was cool with it.
Yeah.
I thought it was really neat.
Outside of Ganondorf, you mentioned that, villains are your favorite, and I definitely find that usually in media as a whole, doesn't matter if it's games, movie, books, that villains are usually more memorable and more fun than the heroes. And I mentioned this when we spoke earlier in the week of just heroes have to be a paragon of virtue most of the time, and sometimes that means that they're a bit flat, but villains are the ones that get the fun designs, the really cool flashy monologues, the creepy, fun, exciting background music when you fight them. And outside of Ganondorf, who are some of your favorite villains? And that can be any form of media that you want.
There's so many. I'll start with one that my chat knows very well. My favorite villain of all time is not really a villain. He's just an antagonist, but it's Wario. Wario is my number one. And it's because he's the epitome of what, like, an antagonist is supposed to be, which is purely they are controlled by, like, some sort of desire, right? One thing that they really want, and they know they want it, and they're not afraid to say they want it, and they do whatever they need to do to get that thing that they want. And in Wario's case, it's gold, it's money. He just wants coins.
If Ganondorf is the avatar of, to not use the actual word malice, but of destruction, Wario is the avatar of greed.
Right, exactly. And that's something that I think is really great about villains. They always have, like, it's not about them as a person being like, oh, in some shows they do this, but usually villains are not like, oh, someone was mean to me once and now I'm a mean person. No, it's like they have a really specific purpose, like one singular thing that they want or that they want to do.
Yeah, and it's just that they will abandon any ethics, morals, or other inhibitions in order to reach the ends that they desire.
Yeah, and I'm kind of that kind of person. Not gonna, I'll be really candid about it. I am that kind of person. If I really want something, I'll just do whatever it takes to get it. That's just the way I am. So I think it's fitting for me to be a villain character because I really am like that. And, within reason, I'm not gonna, raise a village to the ground if I don't need to, like I'm not gonna do all this unnecessary stuff, and I'll be nice to people, but I'm very realistic, and I find that that's what Wario is like. Like, Wario doesn't try to kill people or, like, do anything crazy, but
he's never tried to take over the world.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't want to take over the world. He was just like, but I want the world's money, and he would do things that weren't ethically right, but also weren't, like, usually fully illegal. You know what I mean?
Most of the time.
Yeah, he'd commit small petty crimes, not major felonies.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So I really, really, really love Wario for that. He's my number one. And then Man Breakfast in chat also mentioned Gungora. So I don't know, have you ever played Lost Odyssey? Do you know
I have not. I saw that in the chat and I was like, I don't know what Gungora is, so please educate me.
Okay, I won't go into it for too long, but he's probably my number 2, 3, one of my top 5 villains for sure. Lost Odyssey was an RPG made by the studio that made all the Final Fantasy games. And by studio, I don't mean just Square Enix, but I mean like the small team that specifically worked on all of them.
I've heard of Lost Odyssey, but I'm not really familiar with it in any way.
It basically was like a Final Fantasy game if they didn't have the Final Fantasy brand on it. If they were allowed to go outside of the universe and do whatever they want, and they didn't have to stick to things that the fans would be looking forward to, or characters, or things about the universe, So the game was amazing. The game was really good. I think it was on Xbox 360, like around that time period.
Oh, if it was the same team, I'm looking it up. It was on 360. Wow, that's interesting because usually that team, Final Fantasy, was not on 360 ever.
Right. So this being released on 360 was a different thing for them. So it was a totally different project. The game
Oh,
was
and
really
wow,
great.
Uematsu still was the composer for that? Cool.
Yes, yes. So they even had the same like music style, but they made it with a lot of Final Fantasy music. You know, Uematsu still keeps it sounding like Final Fantasy music, but with
Yeah.
Lost Odyssey, he added a lot more folk instruments and motifs and stuff
Mm.
to it that they just never really put in Final Fantasy games. So it was like it was just a differently flavored Final Fantasy, but I mean that in the best of ways. I think it was better than any of the Final Fantasy stuff that came around that time, you know? It was amazing. And Gongora was the main bad guy in that. And he was like the baddest of bad guys I've ever seen in any game. He truly was just a terrible, horrible person.
So is this a human? Is this a creature of some
Yeah,
sort?
he was a sorcerer and he was like really strong. And you, as the main character, along with some of your party members, are immortals. And so is he. He's one of the immortals. And not to go too much into the story, but the 5 immortals are sent to the world to do something. He's one of them. You're one of them. He just does a lot of really bad shit. He's a really, really terrible guy. And he had a really good purpose, but he kind of got like corrupted over time, because when you are immortal, one of the premises in this game was when you're immortal and you live for a really long time, you tend to go crazy. You kind of go mad, you know. You're not like immortals shouldn't be in the mortal world and blah blah blah. So he's truly someone that just goes crazy and gets hell-bent on his purpose, and it morphs into something really twisted. And he was just such an interesting villain. I recommend you play the game if you could. It's so incredibly good. But he's just a truly horrible guy. And I love that about him. He's really great. I'm looking at a picture of him right now. Ugh.
I looked up the game. I didn't actually look up the picture, so now I'm gonna have to look that up. So do you enjoy this villain origin stories are something that have sort of come in vogue in the past decade or so, I'd say, in most forms of media. Do you have a favorite villain origin story, whether it be something that there has been a piece of media dedicated to that story, or if it is just a story that is told in the larger narrative of another piece of media?
I really, really like, I'm gonna say Dracula from Castlevania. I really, really, really like Dracula. And I like in particular, a lot of people got into Castlevania when the Netflix show came out. And while they have a lot of characters that are from Castlevania, you know, from the game series in there, they kind of did different things with the story than were ever in the games. And I really like what they did in the show. And they gave Dracula this story where, like, he's not really a bad guy. He's just a vampire trying to live and not get killed by humans, because humans hate vampires, right? And he wasn't really doing anything bad. But then humans kill his wife, who is a human. They burn her at the stake. They call her a witch and all this stuff. Like the one time he's not around. And he goes completely mad, completely crazy, raises their towns to the ground and everything. Like he goes, because he's a vampire, he's not a human. He goes this extra level of insane. And that was sort of the origin story to why, when you're watching that show, okay, now you're in this part of the timeline where they're trying to get rid of him in his crazy state and all this stuff. And I really liked the origin story that they gave him there, because he was like so normal. His wife dies, which is of course a tragic, terrible thing, and she's killed by people. But instead of like normal human rage, he gets his like crazy vampire rage, because it's beyond, you know,
that much
what
extra.
a human would feel. Right. And so I really like that, because they took a very human feeling and a very, you know, like things that you can empathize with, but then they had him do things that are beyond what any human would probably do, because of the nature of what he was as a vampire. So I really like that. And I like him in the games. He's yet another one that always comes back, always cycles back into each game, because there's a curse that he'll always come back for the Belmont clan.
Well, he is Dracula.
Yeah. And it's really, I like that. Every time they kill off Dracula, he's not actually dead. He comes back at some other point. So he's another one where I like him for that reason. But yeah, it's really good.
So I found a picture of Gongora, and this is a fashionable man.
Oh yeah, in Lost Odyssey, the world building was really good, as any like Final Fantasy game would be usually. The fashion in the game, they had a really interesting flavor to the way they dressed everyone, and the cultures that they had for people, and it just, the world building was really great. And I was always really sad that there was just one game, because it was set up in a way where they could have made another Final Fantasy series out of this, and just like churned out more games. And they didn't, because they have Final Fantasy. Why would they need to do this,
Yeah.
But yeah, really, really cool game. And that's this game in particular affected a lot of like how I see what villains I like and what I don't like, or how I choose, what sorts of characters I do and don't like, and how important I think that your backstory is realistic, and that you're doing things for a purpose and not just because, ooh, I'm a bad man, or something like that. Yeah, this game really did it for me.
Nice.
With Gongora.
Now, we mentioned music, and music's something I want to get into because when we spoke earlier in the week, you mentioned it, and it's something that I was not aware of, and that doesn't come up a lot on stream, so I definitely want to talk about it. But as sort of a bridge to that, a musical villain origin story, have you seen Wicked?
I have, yes. I've seen it many times.
Yeah,
Many.
that is it. I know it feels like the show is a little overhyped at this point because it's been around for a while and it's such a brand name. But gosh, it's really good. I do really enjoy that show, and it's just it's one that if you had not seen it, I would have just wholeheartedly recommended it to you, because if someone enjoys villain origin stories, and honestly, it's just a good musical all around, that it's got really good numbers, the costumes are great, the effects are great, and it completely upends one of the most prolific Western fairy tales, effectively, without undoing the quote-unquote canon lore. It just, but it is entirely the story that you know and the story that you don't know that happened in the story that you know. And the word of the day there is perspective.
Yeah. I think that's huge, and I think that's something that I always like about well-written villains, right? Like I said, like there's always a purpose, and when they go and flesh out their story and why their purpose is what it is, sometimes they'll make like prequel movies, and I think that's kind of like what Wicked was, right? It's like
it was effectively a prequel with then sort of parallel stuff, but yeah,
and seeing them flesh that out is really important, because I think especially with the Wizard of Oz and a lot of things from like that time period, stories are often told to teach a lesson, especially when it comes to something that's geared toward younger people, right? Like Wizard of Oz was meant to be watched by kids and adults too. It was kind of even across the board, but it was meant to be okay for kids. And when you make something that's for kids, usually there's a lesson in there. And I think it's really important to show the villain perspective too, and be like, this is why they did what they did. It wasn't right. They made this mistake and this bad judgment.
This is why they are wrong, beyond just it's obvious bad. It's like, this is how you should not react. But then also what's sort of cool with Wicked is I really like what you said about it being for kids and that it has a lesson. And Wicked is not a children's show. I would say that it is firmly, it's not quite PG-13. Well, it's about PG-13 is what I'd say. That it's not like there's objectionable content. If you take a 7-year-old there, it's not going to be a problem or anything. But a 7-year-old probably will not be able to fully appreciate everything that's going on or get some of the double entendres and nuance. That's one that if you go back and listen to the lyrics, there's a lot of very smart wordplay in there. And that while the original is aimed at kids and has a message towards kids, I feel that Wicked is aimed at and has good messages towards teens and adults of just, like I said, perspective and just awareness of how one consumes information, frankly.
Right. And that's something that they tend to tell a lot of stories to kids like exactly that. They go, don't hit people, it's wrong. Don't do this, don't be like this guy, he's bad, he's mean. And then it whittles those people down to, oh, well, they're just mean, that's why they do that. So then kids think, oh, well, I'm not a bad person. So then when they do something bad, they go, well, I didn't mean
it's justified, or that there was reason.
Right. So then when you instead show how like a villain got to the point that they did and where in their story they made a bad judgment, and what they could have changed, that's huge. That's huge. And I don't think little kids will really get that. But yeah, like the teenagers and adults, I think should be reminded of that kind of stuff. I think it's always really great when they flesh out a villain like that because, realistically, when you see it, I think it builds a lot of empathy because when you see someone in real life, right, some guy commits some heinous crime and he's on TV and people are like, oh my God, why would he do that? Everyone they really quickly demonize people and they make them into like that, like a cartoon villain. They're like, well, they're just bad. So that's it. Bad people do bad things. And then they don't look at, well, why did this person get to the point that they are? There's usually a multitude of things going on.
Yeah.
In their life, maybe for a long time, or some recent thing happened that pushed someone to a certain point. Maybe they have an issue that, we just didn't, it makes them someone that we would understand differently if we knew that about them, all these sorts of things. So I feel like that's really, that sort of perspective is really applicable in all cases, even in like your real life villains, like I think that's really important.
Yeah. So going from musicals now into music, one thing that I didn't know until recently is that you yourself are a musician.
Yeah, I've played the cello for a really long time, and I play other instruments as well. I've played all of the other string instruments at some point, not very well, but well enough to sit in an orchestra and be able to play them and not do it wrong. At the very least, I've played a bunch of band instruments. I spent a lot of time doing percussion as well, specifically like marimba and xylophone and all the, piano-like ones. Yeah. And I am really, really good on snare drum.
Ooh, snare is an interesting one. Snare is, it's a deceptively complex instrument, and most percussion instruments are. And the type of things that are asked of snare in a band, in particular, if you're in a marching band of some sort, the things that are asked of snare players is deceptively complex. I played violin for half a year in 4th grade, dropped it, and then picked up trombone in the 7th grade and continued that through middle school, high school, and college. So if you asked me to play an F on a violin, I could not tell you how to do that today. I spent more than enough time to still have full memory and knowledge of operating trombone, but I still have that, sort of basic familiarity with string instruments, and obviously just being in orchestras and having friends who play string instruments. One of my best friends is a cellist. That the transition between string instruments is definitely easier than most others. The other similar analogy would be for brass players that for those of you in the chat who aren't band geeks, the way that you play an instrument like the trumpet, trombone, tuba is it's called buzzing, and it's literally just flapping your lips together and just going
you just go into a little thing that looks like a tiny brass toilet bowl. And that's the mouthpiece.
And that it's that same type of thing that you need to do, and it's just the mouthpiece size is different, and the term is embouchure, so you need to have your lips be tighter for something like a trumpet than it would be for a trombone than for a tuba. But that transitioning between brass instruments is going to be easier than going elsewhere, similar to how transitioning between string instruments will be easier than going elsewhere. So the fact that you've done string and percussion and these other ones, and percussion transitions are not necessarily easy. That if it's a piano-like one, like you said, marimba versus xylophone, okay, that's pretty easy. Marimba versus timpani versus snare, not the same.
So different. Yeah. And using a mallet versus using a drumstick, entirely different. The form and the technique for them are so different. And I learned all these things because I liked to fill gaps wherever there were gaps.
And I was going to ask, so how do you get pulled into all these different ones? That I've heard of people being asked to transition to different instruments in the same family, so to speak, but for you to be pulled into those types of directions, are there any stories that you're able to share of how you went from one to the other? Was it just curiosity, or was there an ensemble that sort of necessitated that type of switch?
So I of course was a longtime orchestra person, and there are times when you have gaps in your schedule and you want to fill them with other things. And I actually used to take my lunch period and replace it with music, and just one of the ones
They
that I
let you
wasn't
do
doing at the
that?
time.
Oh, wow.
If you ask enough times, if you get really annoying and you keep going to the
Okay,
opposite
there
of
you
what
go.
yeah, if you just keep asking until they let you, eventually they'll let you because they'll get tired of you. So I would just do that. And so because I just wanted to learn how to play everything, because I really wanted to write music for whole orchestras, and I wanted to understand the instruments better, and you can't just understand them from afar. You have to like go and
you need to know the
actually
ranges.
learn
You
them.
need to know, all right, that
Yeah.
you can write on paper 16th note runs for
Right.
someone playing a trombone. And
Mhm.
if you put this into a music program like Sibelius or Finale, that it will
Yeah.
play a trombonist doing
Right.
16th note runs.
Right. But imagine
Trombonists
that
should not
trombonists
do
are
16th
moving.
note runs.
Yeah.
That you can do that on a trumpet. You can do that on a
Right.
tuba, on a valve instrument. You can't do that with a slide, not cleanly at
Yeah.
least,
No,
unless you're like
Mhm.
actual professional level, and even then they will still
It's
hate you
crazy.
for it.
They're not going to get it right. Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do that and understand the other instruments, was not just because if I want to write this music, I should understand, but because as a cello player in an orchestra, they consistently did that. They consistently wrote passages where they didn't understand that going from this note to that note,
Like,
going
how
from
far
your
does your
lowest
hand have
string.
to move,
Yeah,
back
so
and
they'd have
forth?
you go from your lowest string, where your hand's all the way up at the top of the neck, right? And then
Mhm.
jump your bow over 2 strings to the highest string, and then also slide your hand all the way up and do this, and then do that back and forth like 5 times
Yeah.
really fast in like eighth notes. And I'm like, "What do you think we are? Like, we can't, we're not, the instrument isn't meant for this.
It
It's
does,
gonna,
yeah,
even if you
that's
do it,
when you
sounds
can
like
tell that
garbage."
someone who doesn't play the instrument has written for it,
Yeah,
because you just say,
right.
"This doesn't work."
Yeah. So I didn't want to be one of those people, you know. You experience that a lot when you play cello. It's either the music half the time is they just make you play like a million G's, 16th notes over and over
Yeah,
and
no,
you get the most boring
I
part,
feel like
or it's crazy. Yeah.
the cello is
Mm.
cello and trombone are actually very similar in
Mhm.
purpose in wind and strings. That we are the low
Yeah.
voices. That
Right.
we're not the bass voices, because that's going to be your
Mhm.
standing bass or your tubas, but
Right.
you're the mid-low voices, and then you get like trumpets are to violins as trombones are to cellos, and that
Right.
we usually get either the bass line of dun 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 dun, but sometimes we get these crazier, more moving passages,
Mhm.
and we are not necessarily able to do the things that someone on a
Yeah.
instrument that is designed to normally have those types of melodies are, because it's easier to move your bow around when it is
Mhm.
half the size of the bridge of a cello, because all right,
Right.
it's still going to be tricky to do on a violin or a trumpet to do 16th note runs. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to
Yeah.
discount that, but it's much more physically and technically realistic to do that on those instruments.
Mhm. Yeah, it's they and you can be like a soloist when you play cello, or you could be an orchestra player. You know, there are like different ways to do it. But even then, when they write a solo for a cello that's really intense, really crazy, it's written for the instrument by someone who knows the instrument. You know,
Mhm.
they're not going to make you do these jumps between things that you're simply never going to be able to do cleanly, you know, without finagling it. And then you don't get a good tone out of your instrument because you finagled it in this weird way. And, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I just, my goal was to not be one of those people. And that was why I wanted to do
Mhm.
a little bit of everything. And I did do chorus as well. I did sing, not so much chorus, but I did musicals and stuff, and
Mhm.
practice singing on my own, because one of the cool things with singing is you can practice wherever because your instrument is you. Whereas
Yes.
if you play the cello, you can't just like bring your cello everywhere to practice in your free time. Like it's not, it's
Yeah.
very cumbersome. There's no way. So
And you
that
can
was one
sing
of the things with
softly.
singing.
There is
Yeah.
a just there is a actual limit to how quietly you can
Mhm.
play a string instrument or a
Yeah.
wind instrument to actually get the sound to be done, because you need to put a certain amount of pressure on the string to make the
Mhm.
vibration happen. So that's going to be like the pianissimo, but even that can still be
Right.
somewhat loud. That when I moved
Yeah. You
into
just
an
can't do
apartment,
it.
I couldn't bring my
Mhm.
trombone, because I don't care if you
Oh,
have like particularly thick apartment walls. it's still not going to work to have a trombone player playing even
Yeah.
at their quietest. It
Right,
just
you're
won't
gonna
work.
blast the neighbors out of bed. It's
Yeah.
like you just can't. And brass is supposed to be really loud. And that's the thing with cello is you can play really soft. There are a lot of really pretty softer passages and a lot of pieces that, you can practice. But with cello, they tend to do these really like bombastic pieces where you're using the full range of the cello and you're playing a lot of chords,
Hmm.
which is different from the higher string instruments where they have you play just a lot of really pretty notes, high notes,
Yeah.
and even the fast passages. You're not doing as many chords. With cello, it's so chord heavy. You're constantly smacking your lower strings as you go up to do a high note. And just getting those lower strings in there as much as possible, and it's so loud. If you really rip on the low strings, it is so
Oh,
freaking
yeah.
loud. Yeah, and so yeah, you wake up the neighbors. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You can't practice those parts quietly because if you play below a certain volume, it sounds like shit.
Yeah, and
Not
it's not
many
going to
people
be
play
how you
quietly.
perform it, and you can't
Mhm.
you can't
You don't want to
practice
practice.
that way
Yeah,
because your
right.
muscles are just, muscle memory of how you're going to actually perform
Mhm.
is not going to be the same, so it's
Exactly.
not productive.
Right. So yeah, you end up hoping that you live in a place where you can practice very loudly, or where you don't practice.
Yeah, or you find another place to practice, but then it's real difficult, especially these past 2 years, huh?
Ugh, yeah. I am in a place where I can kind of sort of practice sometimes, but I have not been able to practice nearly as much as I want. And I might actually, like, news as of today, might be moving soon into a place where I can practice really loudly. So if so,
Ooh. Would you
um,
ever consider doing cello
mm,
streams?
yes, that's the thing is I really want to, but I haven't been able to practice. But I was thinking about that and I was like, oh my God, what if I just did like performance
Yeah, that
at the beginning
people
of a
just,
stream?
quote unquote cello karaoke, you can figure out how you want
Yeah,
to brand
yeah.
it, but just people
Mhm.
do singing streams all the time. Why not with an instrument?
Yeah,
I'm frankly surprised that
exactly.
I don't think I've ever really seen I've
Mm,
seen piano streams.
yeah,
I've never seen an instrument uh, performance streamed by a VTuber at the very least
yeah.
that wasn't piano, and even that I've only seen
Mhm.
like 2.
Yeah, very few of them are very musical. I think the community is into the arts, but more so art,
Yeah,
standard art. And not as many instrument players. And those that did play instruments, for the
I think
most
a lot of
part,
them
are
find themselves in our position.
yeah, yeah. It's either that or they were never really that good. They were very amateur and they put it down a long time ago. So they don't want to pick it back up and practice on their own because they
Yeah.
don't have teachers around or
Or
whatever,
just the
like,
amount of time that you have to practice, that if you aren't already
yeah.
skilled at an instrument and you're trying to do content
Mhm.
creation, doing the amount of practice to have minimum viable performance
Right.
skill on top of constant content creation is gonna be overwhelming.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly. So, I don't know, it's something I would really like to do provided I can practice.
Yeah, I suppose, hey,
I just
that's the
haven't been
next
able
meta.
to.
That's your next meta
Yeah.
choice.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, the only thing is, the microphone that I use, I'm like, "H
Oh
how
yeah,
would
you're
this
gonna
work
need
with a
to some
cello?"
particular microphone or need to figure out how to do it. And
Yeah.
I'm
You
sure that
can
if you go to,
mhm,
because there are musician streamers who are using like face cams and
mhm,
whatnot, so I'm sure you
right.
can find out what the appropriate
Well,
mics and
I looked into
setups
this.
are. But oh, you have.
Yeah, I looked into people that do recordings. They do cello covers of things and post them to YouTube, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
looked into what people use, and some people, they actually do use a microphone similar to mine, and then they have a whole different set of settings for it for when they're playing versus when they're speaking. So I could set up like a different settings profile and try that out and see how it works. But they also make these, so with the cello, the strings are on this wooden piece called the bridge, right? And
Yeah,
it's this little wooden piece that holds the strings up away from the body of the cello. And they make a thing that clips onto that. It's a microphone that clips onto it, and it
yeah.
feels the vibrations and pulls the vibrations into a mic that is like physically attached to the clip and records that. So you get this really clean sound with not much of like the bow clacking around or like the fingertip sounds and like
I think
not
I've
much of that
seen
other stuff.
something like that,
Mhm.
not for streaming, but I think I've seen
Yeah.
it for people who do stage performances of like
Right.
that they'll usually put
To
it
boost your
on a
sound.
soloist,
Hmm.
that they'll usually have something like that clipped
Right.
to their instrument that way when they perform as part of an orchestra, or if it's in a a big performance hall or, like outdoors,
Mhm.
that they can make sure to get that clean sound from the soloist. So I would imagine
Right.
that it's a relatively similar mic, if not the same thing.
Yeah, that's it. It's really, really similar to that. So I was looking into it and I was like, ooh, but I don't think it's right for me to buy it until I like practice a lot more
Yeah,
again. You
you
know
need
what
to
I
make
mean?
sure that you're going to get the use out of it. But
Yeah, because
the
I'm like, oh,
technology
it's been so
exists,
long.
and you know where to
Yeah,
go once you decide that you're ready.
exactly. Yeah, but I would love to do that. I would love to do that at some point. And if I can find other VTubers that play other instruments, enough of them, then we can play stuff together. And the only other one that I'm like close to that plays an instrument is my friend Minky, and she plays oboe. And we were like, oh,
Mm.
there's no duet out there
Oh
for
gosh.
cello and oboe, and it would not sound good together. So I was like,
Well,
all
at
right,
the
we're
same
gonna
time,
bring in more
cello,
instruments.
uh,
Mhm.
you could potentially look into really collabing with any given singer, because it
Oh
just
yeah,
becomes accompaniment.
mhm.
So,
That
uh,
or piano. Hmm.
yeah, and there are only a few, but really just
Yeah.
in terms of musical collaborations, that I'd imagine that if a few instrumentalist VTubers popped up,
Hmm.
they'd be in pretty high demand from all the singers that we have in this community, that nobody
Yeah.
really has accompanists. So,
Hmm.
Sneaky Waffles was saying free real estate right there.
Yeah, yeah, instrument streams are free real estate. Exactly. Yeah, and actually one of my mods, Nexi, he plays the piano really well, really well.
Mm,
So saying to him, I was like, what if I give you a piano part for like a solo cello piece, because all of them have a piano accompaniment, all of them. So I was like, what if I give you the piano part and you record it, and then over that I can record myself playing cello once I've practiced a bunch, and then I have that, like it would be really, really cool. But he's not a VTuber, he's just one of my mods.
yeah,
So maybe doesn't have the same weight, but I think it'd be cool.
yeah, but heck, the Mob Army Community Orchestra have
Yeah,
just put out
exactly.
a call and say, all right, anyone in the Mob Army, like, you get
Mhm.
100, or like some large amount of points, because it would take
Ooh,
time and
yeah.
effort to actually do this. But to say, all right,
Mhm.
if you submit your performance of this music, that you provide the music, and then you
Mhm.
just source things together and you splice it all in whatever given program you
Yep.
use, that you can, people have done it before, you just
Mhm.
crowdsource the performance.
Yeah, it's possible. I know there's something called the Reddit Symphony Orchestra
I've
that I've
heard of
seen
that,
people
yeah.
play in. Yeah, and they do just that. They pick a piece and they put up PDFs of the music,
Hmm.
and they're like, "All right, this is what we're playing," and people will just tag in and be like, "Okay, here's my violin part. I played the second violin, right?" And they'll send it
Yep.
in. And they just send in recordings of individuals, and then someone puts it all together, and they just do whatever editing they need to make sure if someone went a little fast in one section, they'll slow them down a little bit, like things
Yeah,
like that.
you can do some
Mhm.
basic tinkering
Yeah.
with technology of, okay, if they were playing a bit louder than they need to, you can just scale back their volume,
Mhm.
or like you said, modulate the speed to an extent, assuming that their speed is consistent
Right.
throughout at the very least,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
just make it fit.
it's really cool. It's really, really cool. So I'm like, I think VTubers could do a little more with with collaboration than just playing games together. But I think the community is in such this early phase still
Yeah,
that people haven't figured out all the kind of stuff they could do. But
yeah,
we're seeing more of it. I've seen more people, pretty much everyone sings, even if they're not like great singers, everyone tries it at some point, and everyone's trying to put out covers. And I think that's really cool, especially because a lot of them, like I said, they don't sing. They just got into it. But
but
a
more
lot of
power
them are
to them.
putting out.
At least they're putting them out
Yeah,
themselves out there, and like you said, that
exactly.
the community is in its
Hmm.
early stages, and you have to start
Right.
somewhere. So that's
Hmm.
good. But I do think we're getting to that point of,
Yeah.
all right, the- there will never be a point where there's too much music, even vocal
Hmm.
music or singing or covers out there. But
Right.
I think that we're getting to the point where the community is ripe for new ideas, and would uh, something other than vocal performances would stand out all the more.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, you know, when this community was in its really, really baby phases, like November, December of last year, there were so much there were so many fewer people, right, in
Yeah,
being VTubers, and there was so much interest in those people because there was a big community of watchers, of viewers, and not that many people doing it. So no matter what you did, you were unique, because you just looked
yeah,
different or you had a different voice, and that was enough. And now there are so many people that it's like, okay, you have to do something else though. If
yeah.
you
It
if
has
you
to be
show
more
up.
than just a model.
Yeah, yeah, if you just show up and your personality is interesting, even if you're really interesting, it's still not enough to get noticed, at least at first, if you wanna, like, pop off or do really well, which is kinda annoying, but that's how it goes. So, like, you have to do something, and it could be something as similar as, like, or as simple as, like, yeah, I play the violin, and I do the occasional cover, you know? Something that simple is enough. So I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, they have it in them that they could find, like, a little extra thing to do. They just have to go for it. I think
Yeah.
I think the community is still in a phase of, since things are so early, people are following a meta of what other people do really hard, and they're not thinking about themselves as individuals. Okay, what are my talents, and how can I turn that into a streaming thing? Outside of what other VTubers are doing. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to see it a little bit.
Hmm. You mentioned that you did composition. That's part of how you
Mhm.
picked up these other instruments, was because you wanted to have that knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, it's difficult to say exactly what type of music you did or name a piece,
Mhm.
because obviously you don't want to dox yourself. But what
Yes.
type of music did you write? Did you enjoy writing ballads, or did you
Oh,
like really intense pieces?
I wrote a little bit of everything. I actually wrote an entire musical at one point,
Oh
which
wow!
took the life out of me. It
Well, because
sucked
that
100 years
then it's not
off my life.
just composition. Then you're also being a
Everything.
lyricist.
Yes, and it was a really, really long project. Really long. It took me forever.
I'd
And
imagine.
it was really hard because I don't know if you've ever listened to any song in a musical, but there are 100 key changes, and it feels like 100 different songs just happened in the past 30 seconds, like
Oh yeah, and just
constantly.
the different parts, and especially when you
Yeah,
get to the last chorus or so, when you
mhm,
usually have overlapping ones and different characters
right.
singing previous verses at the same time,
Yeah.
making sure it all
They're
still
all
fits
singing all different
together.
songs layered over each other, yeah, and then you're like, "Oh, wait, but they all match, that's crazy," right? Like, every musical has that moment, and I
Yeah.
was trying to learn how to do that specifically because I noticed musicals, two things do it. Musicals and JRPG music do that. It's like both of them kinda do that intense use of motifs that all work together,
Yeah.
and, I just wanted to learn how to do it, so what I would do is I would listen to musicals and then I'd be like, okay, let me write basically this musical, but not this musical. Like something that felt a lot like it. Like if I had a musical with 10 songs in it and I wanted to write an 11th song that we could pretend they never released, what would it sound
Mm.
like? And I practiced like that at first and pretty quick, not quickly, but quicker than I thought, I was able to write music for musicals. So at that point I just started churning out something for a musical and it was all no lyrics, it was just melodies and what the music would sound like, and then
Mhm.
a generic storyline. And the lyrics were the hardest part for me, figuring out lyrics to the song because they have to be really clever and every other
Yeah, they
word
have
has
to
to
be
mean
clever, they
something.
have
And
to,
yeah,
progress the
yeah.
plot, and they also have to match the music that's written for them.
Yeah, yeah, it's so much, and, so I think a lot of people when they write musicals, they do it the other way, they actually sing just a tune with lyrics,
Yeah,
and
and
they
then
get
write the
just the
music around
melody.
it.
Yeah,
That
I
they
did it the
that
wrong
you start
way.
with the support beam and then build the structure around it, and you
Yeah,
built this beautiful, beautiful cathedral, and then are
yeah.
trying to, put in the support beams and hope that they,
Right, right.
don't cause this beautiful structure to collapse around them.
Yes, yeah, so it was really hard, but I eventually did it, and I was really proud of it, and then I did nothing with it, so that was it.
Would you be comfortable saying the
Mm.
basic plot of the musical, or if not, maybe what some of the musicals that you
Ooh.
mentioned that you sort of took a few shows and then built off of them, or made what would
Yeah.
be something
I'll
analogous?
talk about the latter, yeah, so I took inspiration from, the producers as far
Ooh,
as the music
okay.
style for, like, the type of music, it was the producers, and then there's also one called Once Upon a Mattress, which is
Ooh,
it's
that's
The
an old
Princess and
one.
the Pea.
That's an
Yeah,
old
it's
one.
yeah, it's the story of The Princess and the Pea, but made into a more comedic version and into a musical format,
Mhm.
and I really like a lot of the music in that one. Yeah, it is an old one, they don't really do it on Broadway, it's, like, not most
It's a high
popular.
school show. It
Yeah, yeah,
is a
right.
very common high school show.
Yeah, yeah, because it's one of those ones that, you don't need the biggest orchestra to do it, which
Yeah.
is also kinda why I studied the music in that one really hard because
Yeah,
I felt
but
like,
there's a
okay,
lot
with
of good
more
character
instrumentation, I could
parts
do it.
in there that
Mhm.
it's a bigger
Yeah.
cast, and you can
Mhm.
make a lot of the numbers big ensemble numbers as well, or you can do it
Yeah,
with just a couple of people in the ensemble that doesn't necessarily
right.
require, like big massive
Mhm.
town scenes very often. So it's
Yeah.
something that you can do with a flexible cast size like a high school's.
Right. And so that was kind of the type of music that I really tried to emulate. And then it was so without going too much into what it was, I went between really dark and really bright vibes in the musical because the storyline was following two characters that had the same purpose for different reasons. So one person
Ooh.
was a horrific villain, terrible person, and one was a great person. And they
Yay,
were both trying to do the
parallelism.
same thing. Yeah, and they were both trying to do the same end goal, but for different reasons. And so the music would be one person, the good guy, singing his version of a piece, and it would sound great and lovely and happy. And then
Do the same
Key
thing in a
changed
minor
into the
key.
terrible guy, right? And sometimes it'd be a bit more than minor. It'd be like instrumentation would change dramatically, and the motifs would bring back these other motifs that we're not used to hearing with this type of melody and that
That's
kind of stuff.
fun.
It was really fun. It was, and like I said, like this was all an exercise in me trying to learn how to write with motifs, So that's why it was a practice. It wasn't really like my life's work. It became this thing that took forever, but
Yeah,
it was
it
all
sounds
for the
like one
sake
of those
learning it.
passion projects that you start on a lark and then 4 months
Becomes
later you
something
realize that
else.
it has consumed your life.
Yeah, exactly. And I literally took 2 years to write it. Constant work on it. But yeah, so that's kind of what it was. So the producers was a big one, and then a lot of the really nice soft melodies from Once Upon a Mattress worked into the protagonist kind of guy's lines. And
Mm.
then for the antagonist, I pulled a lot of inspiration from the music from Sweeney Todd, especially because
Ooh.
of the
Well,
way
that
they
yeah.
have it's
If you're looking
overly
for
dramatic.
dark, overly dramatic, creepy,
Yeah.
villainous, evil feeling stuff, Sweeney
Mhm.
Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street's gonna be a good
That's a good one.
source.
Yeah. So I really liked it Sweeney Todd because my character had some similarities where he would have like horrific mood swings. So he'd be singing one type of melody and then all of a sudden remember, oh, but this thing's terrible too, and then switch to this other motif. Because again, the practice was about motifs, which is why I was writing it.
Mhm.
So in Sweeney Todd, they have that. A lot of the stuff that character sings, he's going back and forth between these like different emotions constantly. The dude's crazy. So yeah, so I took a lot of inspiration from that because it fit the exact thing I was trying to do.
Mm.
Yeah, 2 years
Musicals
of my
are
life.
not a topic that I get to discuss very often, so
Yeah,
this is fun.
I'm glad.
2 shows that I particularly enjoy that have, uh,
Mm,
sort of parallel themes, not quite like what you're talking about, but ones that
mhm,
I think you might find interesting.
yeah.
One is called City of Angels. Not sure if you're familiar with that
Oh,
one?
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm,
For those in chat who might not be, it's a show by a very famous musical composer named Stephen Sondheim, and
mhm.
it is a Sondheim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just making sure I'm not twisting that. And basically, it's a mystery novel writer is having his book adapted into a film,
Mhm,
and you are seeing the process of the author going through this creative procedure where the book and the story that he's written is being twisted and manipulated by the producer to be something that it's not. But at the same time, we're also getting the story that he wrote being played out and going through the
mhm.
mystery and finding parallels between the writer and what he wrote. The
Yeah.
Act One finale is called You're Nothing Without Me.
Mhm,
And the way that most productions will block this show is that you will have like a line literally down the center of the stage. And
mhm.
one side of the stage will be the real world, the other side of the stage will be the book world. And
Right.
it's sort of mystery noir. So usually you'll have the stuff on the book side be in grays and browns, and it
Mhm.
looks like you're watching an old noir film, and the other one will be
Yeah.
in color because that's real, that's the actual life.
Mhm.
And the Act One finale, You're Nothing Without Me, is the writer and the protagonist of his novel saying to each other, I'm the reason you're a success. The
Mhm.
writer is saying, I wrote you, I'm the reason that you are the hit that you are. And the
Right.
character saying, if it weren't for me, you've written a lot of other things, but if it hadn't been for me, you wouldn't be the success. You wouldn't have your movie deal.
Mhm.
And it's sort of fun seeing them go through their parallels. And at least in the production that I was part of, I know several others have done it. The characters, except for this one moment, never cross the line outside of their
Yeah.
respective territories. But in this one moment, in this song, you have a moment where the two literally cross the boundary into the other worlds for a moment as they're singing at the climax of the song, and then return back to their respective worlds. But just
Mhm.
it's a very fun thing for a theater nerd like me. If that's such a powerful moment, it sounds like such a small, insignificant thing, but of
Mhm.
two characters literally taking a step over a line. And
Right, and it becomes
yeah,
so significant, but it sounds tiny when you describe it. Not your description was good, but if you TLDR'd it into, like, a sentence, it would sound like nothing.
yeah,
But then the musical builds this huge climax up to this point, and it, like, has so much significance that when you're sitting in the theater watching it, everyone gasps, you know? Everyone's like,
yeah.
"Oh my god, they walked over the line."
The other one is a musical called Curtains.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
you know Curtains?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, nobody knows about Curtains. I'm so happy,
Yeah.
Giga. You have no idea.
I got into a lot of really, really obscure musicals and classical music and opera and all this stuff when I was learning how to write because I wanted to make sure that I was not just writing stuff that was from the same five people. You know, I feel like everyone takes inspiration from the same people, and I wanted to expose myself to as many things as possible. So the number of weird musicals I've seen or listened to over the years is way too much. Way, way, way too much
All
at
right,
this
well,
point.
so if you know it, I gave the
Mm.
synopsis of City of Angels. Please tell the good people who might not know it about the awesome, underrated show, thank you very much, that is Curtains.
Curtains, from what I remember, who was the lead character? Was it Frank the lieutenant?
Yeah, Frank Coffey, Coffey,
Choff
Chaffee, yeah, because it's a Boston,
Choffee, yeah, yeah.
it's the most Boston name you've ever heard.
Oh yeah, he's like super super Italian. And he was good at his job, right? He was like a detective, I think.
Yep.
They called him lieutenant, but he was a detective, and he also wanted to be a performer in like
in
on
musicals.
Broadway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to do musicals, and then there's also Nikki, who's Nikki Harris.
Yeah,
Nikki
good
Harris, I
memory.
think? Oh yeah, I'm trying. I
Yeah, so
remember
like
details,
even without
but
the names of just that just I
yeah,
suppose the
yeah.
crux of this show is that it's a show within a show.
Right. So basically, so he has this dream and he wants to be a performer. He meets Nikki, and she is like, I think the scene that he meets her, was it when she was trying out for the show? I don't remember when he
Uh,
meets her, but she's trying to debut on Broadway.
well, I suppose bearing the
Yeah.
lead a bit, it's after the
Mhm.
murder.
Yeah. Basically, there's a murder that happens at the theater, and he has to go and investigate it. But also, it's at a theater, and he always wanted to be on
Yeah.
Broadway. So there's just a lot that happens with
Yeah,
it. and
the
that's
the
kind of set up
TLDR
a
on this
lot.
one
Mhm.
is opening night of a show. Leading lady is killed during the curtain call. We come to find
Yes.
out this leading lady was wildly unpopular, so everyone in the cast has a motive. The cast the cast is sequestered in the theater, so they're locked in. It's all right. We know whoever did it has to be in here, so
Mhm.
you all can't leave. But
Right.
meanwhile, they want the show to go on, even though they've lost their leading lady. Nikki
Yeah.
is the understudy, so she is now
She's
having
now the
to
lead
get to be
actress,
the
right?
lead actress,
Mhm.
and it's the investigation of who done it, all the while of developing and trying to salvage this musical, because the whole thing was the original leading lady was very pretty but had
Yeah.
no talent whatsoever, and that's part of why
Right.
most of the cast hated her, is that it's a very
Mhm.
talented cast and the leading lady was dragging them down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is part of what gives everyone the motive. Other characters have deeper ones than others.
Right.
And it's that whole parallelism of what's happening in the show that they're rehearsing, but also what's happening in real life as this murder mystery is going on. And
Mhm.
it's a love letter to theater by two of the most prolific names in theater. That it was the last Kander and Ebb show, Fred Ebb and John Kander, because Fred Ebb passed away briefly before the show began its previews.
Right.
And this is the team, Kander and Ebb. If you don't know them, you know their work because they did two little shows called Chicago and Cabaret.
Which were enormous. And I know that some of the reason why not a lot of people know Curtains and it's not considered quote unquote the best, you know, it's not like always on Broadway, is because it's like there's so many inside theater jokes.
Yeah.
That unless you're really into theater, you're not.
It's a very meta show.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people don't know Curtains is because it's for people who already really like theater.
It's for theater nerds by theater nerds, and that does limit its audience, admittedly. I got to be in that show once. I played the character's name is Christopher Belling. He is this flamboyant British director, and I acted throughout high school, and it was my favorite role. It was my senior role as well, and oh my gosh, that's part of why I love the show. I also just love the show because I think it's super fun, but I have that inherent bias and nostalgia for that added reason. So
yeah, no, it's a fantastic one, and the music from it is great, you know. Just knowing who the producers are and everything, you know they're going to produce a good show. But its only downfall in my eye was just the specifically that it was so meta, you know. It not everyone's gonna get it.
It's very specialized, and if you know that stuff, you're gonna have a good time. If you don't, a quarter of the jokes will go right over your head. You'll still enjoy 75% of it. You'll still enjoy most of it, but you won't get all of it. Also, I appreciate that you said "in my eye" there. Is that something that you've trained yourself to do over the months and just your time as GEEGA, saying actually, I versus eyes?
Yeah, you know, when I have the patch on, I try to say I. On the new model, you'll get to see my other eye, but it's extremely light sensitive, and it doesn't work most of the time. So that's why I kind of keep the patch on. And it can pop. I can pop it right out. I don't show that on the model, but I can pop it right out. And there's fun lore with that. But, you know, generally, I have one eye most of the time. And when I have the patch on, I actually take the eye out first for comfort, and I throw the patch on. So most of the time, I have one eye. But there are times where I have eyes. So, you know, it just depends on the flavor of the day.
Haha, dubers, generally.
Yeah, I say the word all the time, and every time I do, they're like, "It's just said it," in chat. I get so excited.
Hey, at least they're easy to please.
Somewhat.
Now, outside of musicals, classic literature is something that you mentioned to me you really enjoy, and that's another thing that doesn't really come up a bunch on stream. Is it something that I suppose you found yourself enjoying originally, maybe from school, that where you assigned the classics and you realized, unlike many people in school, oh wait, I'm actually enjoying reading these and I want to find more? Or were there certain titles that you discovered on your own or through recommendation that sort of sparked that interest?
I've always been a big reader. I still am. I just reading is just one of my most favorite pastimes, and I typically read the classics before I had to read the classics, whatever those specifics were. So I already had a good experience with them. That was not in the form of a class setting with
mandated
giving their opinions and when you're assigned to read a book and everyone around you is like, this is stupid, I hate this book, I don't get this chapter, and they make you read it chapter by chapter and they don't let you just sit down with it and go, it ruins the experience, you know. So I typically read a lot of those things before I had to, and that made it good. There are still things I hate. I think Catcher in the Rye is one of the worst books ever, and I hate it. I will die on the hill. I hate it so much. I hate it. Yeah. Cannot. Oh God. I just
the one for me,
one of the worst characters in the world.
There were two books for me that I remember I just did not enjoy. One was Heart of Darkness. That was the densest book I've ever read. That just I
don't blame you. I actually love it.
Writing in that book, like I enjoy good flowery writing as much as the next person, but gosh, that was one that was just dense is really the best word that I have to describe it.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a slog, and I think they make people read it at a young age when they shouldn't. Like you should only give it to people who are already interested in reading. If you give it to someone who doesn't even want to read a middle school level book, how are you
Well,
how
it
are you
was
going
when
to
I
get
got
them
in
to
high
read
school,
that?
and it was an advanced
Yeah.
reading class, or
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I think it was AP Lit actually.
Mhm.
But it was just it wasn't that I couldn't understand it, but it was like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm having to do
Mm.
significant mental gymnastics just to understand what's being written, because usually it's all
Yeah,
right, read this and then try and figure out the deeper meaning. And the thing with Heart of
right.
Darkness is not necessarily that it is concealing deeper meaning, but that
Mhm.
its deeper meaning is written at surface level, but written
Mhm.
in kind of convoluted structure, I suppose.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, the not to get too deep into it, it's a product of the time. I think was it like 1899, something like that. It was
Somewhere
like
around
right at
that.
the end of that century it was published. And then the author, from what I know, he was Polish American. So while he spoke extremely good English, he also had influence from another language. And a lot of the time when
Oh, so
people
there might
speak
have been
another
something with
language, they end up studying English in a way where, there are a lot of people who write really well in English, even though it's not their first language, or if they learned, I believe he learned the two languages in tandem. I don't think he was Polish first
hmm,
only, and then learn English.
but there might
But
have been Polish
yeah,
grammatical and sentence structure
influence.
influence in that. Honestly, I
Right.
didn't know that, and if that's the case,
Mm.
that makes me
Well,
appreciate it a lot more,
yeah,
because
and
at
it's not
least it
just that, but it's like it's not just the Polish influence. It's more so that when people learn languages in tandem and they study English, they end up studying English in a meta sort of way a lot more than the average native English speaker who only speaks English. So
yeah.
they tend to write less naturally and they tend to write more mechanically. And
Yeah.
I think that's more so what happened with that book, which happens with a lot of books from that time period, because people who were writers were studying the language at its core, and flowery language was not just what gave you good feelings or whatever. It was what used the language most masterfully. And a lot of people would write books with as many unique words in them as possible to be like, check me out, I'm a cool writer and I know lots of words. And it was literally like just a contest for a lot of them. So you get some books from that time that are written really well and were definitely like the most unique of their time with how they used words and language, but it was written that way because they wanted to show that off,
Hmm.
not
Dang,
because
we're
it's the
getting
best.
literature history here with GEEGA tonight.
I like reading.
Yeah.
I like books.
Any other particular favorites?
Uh, well, if you hated that book, you're gonna hate this next one.
Oh boy,
Ulysses by James Joyce, one of my tops of all time. I have never met many others who
I don't think I've
could ever get
ever
through it.
read Ulysses, actually.
If you didn't like Heart of Darkness, you will not be able to get through Ulysses. It is pain. It
It's
is
almost it's the
pain.
type of thing that I wonder if I'd
Mhm.
enjoy it more now. One, not
I
having to
wonder.
do it, just also
Mhm.
a that was also a year that I was really busy with a lot of other
Right,
stuff,
right.
and it was just,
Yeah.
um,
If you
I it was one of
Yeah.
those classes that I knew I could skate by on well
Mhm.
enough, and I did so,
Right. So
um,
the level of
and
effort was
the
maybe
level of
not
effort
quite
might
there.
not have been the most,
Mhm.
and just, eh it was
Mm.
probably also just the subject matter was, I suppose, not terribly compelling to me, but from what I know of
Right.
Ulysses, that's, very different subject
You
matter.
you might you might like it a little better. I think there was also a film which is not the best film, but a lot of people enjoyed that because they finally were able to understand the story when they
Yeah.
saw it in that
Stories are
form.
generally
Mhm.
easier to comprehend in motion and in words than through writing of just, uh
Mm.
Shakespeare is obviously the easiest example of it was literally written to be watched, not read.
Right, right. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's very hard to read, and it's very hard to discern why you're even reading it, what the purpose of the story or the novel is in Ulysses as you get through it. It's just one of those ones where like after you read it, you're like, what was the lesson here? What it's a little nebulous, but if you
Oh, wait a minute,
read it really
Ulysses is the
carefully.
Odyssey. Or
It's separate.
okay, it's separate.
Well, it mirrors.
Oh no, wait, no.
some
Ulysses is
parts of it.
Ulysses is
name-
the name is named after
Odysseus.
Odysseus. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry,
So
I knew
his
they were
name is-
related. It's not the same
Right.
story. It's influence there. Okay,
Yeah,
my
it's
bad. Yes.
influenced, and there are parts of the story that are very much so influenced by that as well.
Because I
So
read
it's
the
not
Odyssey. I
really known.
enjoyed the Odyssey.
Yeah. It just mirrors it a little bit. And if you know the Odyssey really well, when you read Ulysses, you'll understand some of the parallels between them, which is just a really cool thing. But that's just like an extra tidbit, you know. It's not like a major point of the plot. But it's really good, and it specifically gives you a really good idea of like Dublin at the time. I think this was I think he published it in the 1920s, but I think
Yeah,
he
I'm looking
started
up,
writing like 20 years before or something. Like I remember
Yeah,
this being
chronicles
a
the
long time
appointments and encounters of
Hmm.
the interned Leopold Bloom in Dublin in the course of an
Mhm.
ordinary day, the 16th of June, 1904.
Yes. It is a very it's I find it really interesting. However, the way it's written is worse than Heart of Darkness as far as like the density. People will often say that they read a singular paragraph from Ulysses and they have no idea what they just read. They have no idea what happened, where they are, who they are. You know, they come out of it reeling. So it's very much so a slog. But if you can get through it, if you pace yourself nicely, I think it's a really great book. It's really, really well done. It's one of my favorites. And when I'm feeling ready for it, I occasionally reread it. But it takes a lot out of me. It's really it like drains your soul a little bit every time you read it.
Is that one that you would ever consider doing a reading stream for, or do you think that it would just be too difficult to stay allowed in the structure that it's written?
I would be very down. I don't know if I streamed that. If I streamed myself reading Ulysses, I don't know that anyone in my chat would be able to keep themselves going.
I feel
I
like
might kill them. You know,
you might need to make it a gag goal in a subathon someday that
Yeah.
you make it
I'll
sort
read
of
Ulysses.
you make it appointment viewing because it was a goal for something or just a gag of some sort.
Yeah.
That you don't just sort of one day say, all right, y'all, I'm gonna read Ulysses, tune in tonight if you're interested. You make it an event somehow.
Yeah. That's something, you know, actually, do you know this? Do you know Joel? Foxy
Yes.
Joel?
Yeah.
So he had a goal. I think it was just a subscriber goal. He said, if I reach this many subscribers in this month, I'll do a book reading stream. And he did that. He did a Saturday stream where he turned it into him reading Grimm's fairy tales. And normally, you know, he yells a lot. He projects his voice very loudly.
Oh yeah.
And he just did it in a low voice, which is like kind of like his normal talking voice when he's not trying to
just
project.
the very calm librarian audiobook meter controlled voice.
It was so nice to hear, and I think that's something that would be really nice because even when I'm talking to you now, I'm projecting a little bit. And you know, a lot of my viewers have heard me sit in the Discord and speak normally where I'm not trying to project, and both are my very real voice, you know. But when you're streaming, you tend to just project more. But it would be really nice to have an excuse to do a stream where I'm not doing that. You
almost
know?
ASMR, but not quite.
Right. Just a relaxed sort of thing. And I think book reading is the way to do that. And when I heard Joel do it, I was like, oh wow, this is so different, you know. And I really liked that. And I was like, I wish more people did this. But I don't know if if Ulysses is the one for that. I think I would lose everyone. The other one of my other top books of all time that is also similar, I guess like similarly not good for stream. I really love Dante Alighieri. And I really love old classic literature. And the Divine Comedy is, of course, like his big work. And that's one that it reads like the Bible, you know, like it reads like somewhere in between the Bible and Ulysses. Like it's a slog and it's written in archaic kind of translation. But I love it a lot. I really love the story and I love reading it. So I'm like, both of those would be top contenders to do a reading stream if I hit like a like a monthly sub goal that was really high.
Yeah, just have some sort of sub goal, and then what you do is you offer a poll of your favorite literature things. That way, you get the community engagement there, and you can have people decide what they would want to hear most. But one way or another, I'm sure you can find your way to that type of reading stream.
Yeah, at some point I think it'll end up happening. Whether it's a stream or I do it as like a Discord stage, they have the stages function.
Yeah.
You could do like a podcast sort of thing. I could do it like that too. That might be really interesting. So I'll consider it. Not right now, but I'll consider it. And I like reading a lot. I have a huge list of books that would be really good for that sort of thing. So I could give them my library. You could
do Mob Army Book Club. Pick a book pick a book that you've already read, so you don't need to put in the legwork there. But then just say, all right, everyone, read chapters X through Y, and we'll have a Discord chat about it on this night. And you might refresh yourself on it, but that way it's no extra effort for you outside of the time for the conversation, and that way you can maybe start pulling a few people in the army into this classic literature rabbit hole.
That would be cool. I actually I have something I do every December. Every December there's a book that I read, and I won't reveal what it is just yet. But there's a book that I read. Yeah, every year. I always do. So maybe
use that as the pilot
to do it. Right. I could maybe work that in and do the book club and force everyone else to read it, because it's it's from my favorite author, and it's like the book itself is not the hardest read. It's really not bad. So I think I could force everyone to read it.
Put in some points for them. Yeah. Just that's the other benefit of having faction points, that it always works of just when you need that little extra incentive, that little bit of bribe.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're like, oh, here's your points, when they finally read the thing. It'd be funny.
Speaking of other things to do on stream, you've mentioned this in a couple of your streams, is that you want to eventually do some sort of game show, that you just really enjoy game shows as a whole, but that you want to be able to design and run one, whether it be as a collab with other VTubers or potentially one with chat and community at large. For starters, what are some of your favorite game shows just to watch?
Well, this might be a little boring of me, but I love Jeopardy so much.
It's a classic for a reason. It's a classic for a reason.
I'm a trivia person. I really I get an enormous sick satisfaction out of being like, I remembered that fact. I knew the answer. I love that kind of stuff. So I love trivia, but I really like any game show where being funny is a way to gain points or a way to do well, or just a premise of it. So when I did my subathon, I played the match game at the end. I ran a pilot episode basically of the match game, and I got 6 VTuber friends on there and made them play. And what I did was, normally they'd have a contestant come up from the audience and be a person answering these questions, and then they'd have their panel of celebrities answer the same question where they fill in a blank in a sentence, and then they'd all reveal their answers, and anyone who matched the contestant, that contestant would get points for those people.
Yeah, because match game is all about knowing the other person that you are matched with. That it's a game that was sometimes done with couples. Sometimes it's done with people who don't know each other, and it's sort of the gag of what type of assumptions can you make about the person, or it really works with any level of familiarity, but the whole meta of it is different depending on that level.
Right. And the good thing about that show format is you're not just giving an answer to a question, right? They don't ask a question and you say, this is the answer. Instead, you're giving your own answer, what you think would be a good blank. So you get a lot of personality in the show. And then, a lot of the time, the panel of people, they would give a real answer, and then sometimes they would just give an answer that was purely,
if they have no idea, they're just going to put in something funny because, okay, even if I can't get the points, let's at least get a reaction.
Right. And that makes for a really, really, really good show. So that's why that was the first one I wanted to pilot on my channel. So I did a really hastily thrown together version that worked out really well. at the end of my subathon, and I had a bunch of friends on it that like I personally knew really well, so I knew, they would know me well, so they could try and answer my
Mm,
answer my questions similar to me, to like, they wouldn't have an advantage over each other, not too much.
yeah.
So it was a good group of people. They were all balanced. I feel like the cast was so good kind of by chance. Like each of them had really, really good individual personalities that were so different from each other. So like it was honestly like a perfectly cast pilot episode. And just doing it, I felt like, okay, if I take this idea and I amp this up, I go like triple, quadruple the production value, and I structure it better. I maybe have some mini games or games that are actually my own and not just like, a game show format that already exists, that I could probably make something really cool happen. Because I think a lot of VTuber collabs are really, they're not utilizing the fact that they're collaborating, they're simply playing a game that
Yeah.
they could have already played with a friend, and you get to see people interact very naturally. But I think it's funnier when you treat them all like improv actors, and you throw them into a room and make them
Yeah.
do some sort of scenario. I think that's a lot funnier from an entertainment perspective. So I think game shows are a really good way to format that, to throw people into a room together and make them make funny things happen. But with a game show, you're at least giving them a premise,
Yeah.
So even if they don't know each other super well, you can still throw them into a room and they can make funny things happen.
Yeah,
Whereas, if it was like a talk show and you brought 6 people on, but they don't really know each other that well,
A
it's kinda
panel
weird.
talk show is not going to work very well unless you
Yeah.
have a particular topic in mind, or if
Mhm.
it's the same question being asked to everyone. A phrase that I'm very fond of in many different things is restrictions breed creativity. And
Yeah.
in this case,
Mhm.
the restriction of this is how the show is run, this is what it's about, that
Mhm.
premise, it gives people that direction for creativity, because the
Right.
worst creative environment is a completely open one. And it
Mhm.
sounds counterintuitive because wait, if it's completely open, isn't that great? Because it means you can do anything. It's yes, you can do
Right.
anything, but most people don't know what to do when they can do anything.
Mhm.
When you have a
And
direction, then you get
yeah.
stuff
You get
to
more ideas
really.
off of it. You start to
Mhm.
associate it with other things. Yeah, and that's why like a show like Whose Line does super well,
Yeah,
right?
because
Because they
it's
give them a
all about
prompt.
everything
Mhm.
is the restrictions, and it's just they give a lot
Right.
of different restrictions, and each restriction lasts 5 minutes with these very funny people.
Mhm. Yeah, so I would like to see more of that. I personally, something I was talking about, with some friends, was doing like a Whose Line sort of thing, but we'd all need 3D models and full body tracking for it to
Yeah,
like
because
work.
so
Yeah.
much of
Mhm.
Whose Line is the physical comedy of it all, that you can
Right.
do just audio comedy and
Mhm.
whatnot,
But
but
it only
it's
works for
so
some of
much
their
better
segments,
if you
and
have
yeah,
just
yeah.
physical gestures that you can work with it. There's
Right.
so much more.
Exactly. So I would love to make that sort of thing happen. Imagine we all green screen ourselves into the same room, and we start doing improv acting. I feel like there's so much that could happen. I was even talking to one friend in particular, because both of us are very tech oriented, and I said, "Well, we don't have to just green screen ourselves together. Couldn't we just put ourselves in the same like Unity environment, and like
Yeah, or
not use
just
like VR chat, but use our own thing that's similar to that, and be in the same
yeah,
environment and
have a
have
contained
objects?"
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like I could put like a beach ball object that we could pick up and use and as props for
Have
this.
props. Yep.
So and you honestly, you could do it in VR chat to start off with, as like
Yeah.
a
Just
pilot
have
thing without
a
later.
private room or something that if you
Right.
don't have proprietary or more customized
Hmm.
uh, software to work with, that VR chat I think is a fine
Yeah.
place to do a pilot before
Right.
investing too heavily into something specific. Also, I see
Hmm.
you slime with teeth at 3D model when never for me, but hey, Giga, if you ever need your Drew Carey for this, I'll play Drew Carey.
Ooh. Noted. Yeah, and if you need the hookup, if you need a really quick 3D or 2D model, doesn't have to be great, just for the sake of hosting something with a face, you let me know. I'll get you a nice MS Paint model real quick. We can do
Noted
that.
as well.
But yeah, I think there's so much you could do with that kind of stuff with a game show format. So for me, uh, before I decided you know, how I was going to stream and just really anything of how I was going to do any of this, the first thing I told myself that I wanted to do was, well, I want to do game shows because I've always wanted to do game shows.
Who doesn't want to
And
be a
I,
game show host? Game show hosts make people
yeah.
happy.
And I think it's something that I particularly am well tuned to because I'm really good at bouncing off of other people no matter what they're like. No matter what they're like. And I'm really good at bouncing off of very different people in the same conversation. I find that when I'm in voice calls with a lot of people who don't know each other, I tend to be like this sort of center point or mediation point for a lot of them. Where some you know those social situations, right? You're in a room with people, they're talking. Someone says something, another person says something to what they said, but you can tell there's a mental disconnect.
Yeah.
You know what person A is saying and you know what person B is saying, but they're not hearing each other at all.
Yeah, they're
I'm the person
talking
who
in
sees it
circles.
immediately.
The
Right.
person who
And
says,
I
wait,
jump
yes,
in and I go,
you're
"No, it's this."
actually agreeing, but not in
Yeah,
the same words.
Right. And so there's a lot of disconnect between people, and I feel like that sort of thing messes up game shows and like talk shows and things like that. And I think a lot of VTubers are not good at navigating that. I've noticed like that. I know that's a really specific thing, but it's a huge problem because then a lot of like stream formats that people want to do, they can't do because they're not good at mediating conversations between people. So I feel like that's a really specific thing that I'm good at, but it's an important thing. So I try to think about how I can leverage that, how I can use that to my advantage, you know? And I think game shows is a good way, or talk shows, podcasts and things where you bring on people who don't know each other. I'm fine with that sort of thing because I'm really good at making the room comfortable, you know? And if
being able to generate those
something,
conversations
translate it.
when there isn't anything that is pre-existing.
Right, exactly. So that's sort of the kind of stuff that I want to do. And then, just game shows in general are really fun and flashy. And there's so much you could do with creating game shows purely with OBS, right? With all the different things you can do.
So
with
many
images,
different tools.
Videos. Yeah, there's so many tools that exist. It's honestly, I don't understand why more people haven't done it. I don't know. I probably because it's a shit ton of work.
Yeah,
to be honest.
I was going to say
so
the
much
setup
work.
is a lot, but it's the type of thing that once you put in just that initial time investment of the framework, most game shows are modular enough that, you know, 80% of the work is going to be that first go around of getting the framework up and running. And then it's for something like Jeopardy, it's literally just put in the different words, put in the different category names and the different questions. That's all you need to do. If it's for the match game, it's going to be the same basic back structure and transitions. And it's just, what are the questions that you're asking?
Right.
Same thing for Whose Line. That's part of why game shows are so successful and able to run for so long is because the amount of work that needs to go in from one episode to the next is in relativity, like compared to any other show where you're going to need to write scripts, you're going to have different blocking, you're going to have any number of other factors, that the number of day-to-day changes on a game show are just miraculously small compared to anything else in an episodic format.
I think that's huge. And you know, that's something that's huge with streaming, right? And that's one of the reasons that I think game streaming in particular is so successful. The same reason that game shows are successful,
exactly.
Right?
Once you have your overlay, you can do anything on it.
Exactly. VTubing is like that, right? You get your model, you set up your overlay, you start streaming. Now what do? Rinse, repeat, you know?
Yep.
Obviously, you're not going to make it very far if you're not innovating here and there, you know? Like nowadays you have to do that. But at least your bread and butter you don't have to worry about, you know? The innovation you can take your time with and not get burnt out because you can do normal streams.
It's iteration, not complete just
like overhaul
and you know, ground up work every single time.
Right. And you can see how difficult it is because when people do a debut of themselves, it's still them, but they just get like a new model and they're like, oh, it's my official debut of my new model. And they put together, honestly, all they put together is slides and then they hire someone to do like an animation, right? Just that amount of work wipes them out. They get so burnt out just from that. And I'm like, well, imagine writing a television show.
Yeah.
And you're writing, you know, a whole script. You're changing the setup, everything. You're getting your actors familiar with it. You're doing all this per episode. It's huge. So that's, you know, why I think streaming is done so well. And game shows, you know, I think for me, that's really doable on streams, right? Because if people liked the match game, I could probably do that format many times and then just do little iterations on it. and then find a new format and do that a bunch of times, and then maybe go back to some old formats, maybe have 5 formats in my pocket that I
just rotate them
pull
out.
Yeah, and if I did one a month, then you wouldn't see one format come up until like 6 months later.
Yeah.
You know, like it's really
Keeps
well
everything
paced.
fresh.
It's really doable. Exactly. So I think about it and I'm like, you know what? Why don't I do that? I definitely will. So it's something I plan to do more of when I have my new model. And you know, there are a lot of things that I'm not doing until I have the new model, because I feel like if you push yourself forward and then you change up a little bit after that, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
It feels a little weird. I think it's better to do it
Concept
kind
of
of all
sunk
at once.
costs.
Yeah, exactly. So right now this is like GEEGA beta, you know, beta phase, and then like pre-release, and then everything after the new model, I'll start to do more of that type of content and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, game shows being like the biggest part of that as far as what you see on stream or maybe on YouTube. I don't know if the best format is to like record it and edit it. That might be way better. Or maybe I do it on stream,
and
but
then
I record that and then
record that, edit, make it a bit more snappy and flashy, make sure that you cut out any of the delay or transitions in between,
right.
maybe add in a little bit of pop here and there,
Mhm.
and then upload that. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, of just
Yeah.
experimenting and figuring out what's the best presentation method and venue.
Mhm. Yeah. So and it's the sort of thing I could probably do in both formats, but that's the overarching plan, right? Is I would like to experiment with that and just see what works and keep having fun with it. And something like a game show, I could have even, you know, people within my community tell me what they would like to see. I could let them submit formats and then I test them on stream. And if they're really good, then I go, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube episode of this and film it officially, you know, like things like that. I think it'd be really, really cool. It's the sort of thing that I could really get the community involved in.
Yeah, just different trial runs and figure out, all right, if there's a concept that sticks, even if it's not perfect yet, that if you realize, oh, this just worked really well, and if I iterate on a little bit, then I can get it to where I need to be at. Having those sorts of trial runs, I think, is definitely a smart approach.
Yeah. So it's a format that's comfortable, it's repeatable, it's entertaining. I can get all sorts of people involved, so I see no reason not to do it. So that's going to be my direction in the future, whenever it is.
Now, one other sort of show that you could do, which I think you said you don't want to do yet, but also because it's very difficult, would be a cooking stream, because you, GEEGA, are very into cooking. I think you've had a stream a week for the past probably month or so, where it's just you in chat watching cooking videos. And sometimes it's good cooking videos, sometimes it's bad cooking videos, but that it's food preparation videos. And it was something that I did not realize until I saw one of those streams of just, wait a minute, GEEGA's really into cooking, because you'll be watching these and, you know, I've seen other channels watch these and it's, ooh, that looks really good, or wow, that's such a cool design or technique. But when you're watching it, you're saying, oh yes, they're, you know, using this particular technique, or, oh, I would do this differently, that you're actually commenting on the methodology and the ingredients and everything. Yeah, just like, wait a minute, you know all this stuff. So for starters, how did you get into cooking?
My family has a long history of making sure that everyone in the family can cook. Everyone has to cook. It's just very important. And I personally think, you know, if you've got to eat multiple meals a day, if it takes up your entire life, you should spend a lot of time caring about it. I really think you should. I'm one of those people, I never, for the longest time, I didn't really like go to restaurants and stuff. I always ate at home, and I just did not explore many things. I just cooked whatever I knew how to cook, because I'm really practical and frugal. Or I was. And then I started going to restaurants because I started watching, this is, you know, years ago, so I've been like this for a while, but I started watching food channels and Food Network. I
watched the Food Network a lot growing up. That I think it started with Unwrapped, which was the show that it was basically the only actual show on Food Network that wasn't about cooking. It was it was showing the back end of production of
Right.
various foods. It was the mechanics. So, you would
Mhm.
see how does Coke get made and bottled, and it's
Right.
all the different machinery and just massive manufacturing
I
plants
love that
and the
stuff.
technology behind it. And then you go into Iron Chef or
Mhm.
Emerald, and that's sort of where the base was. And then
Yeah.
things that grew out from there into the different things you have today.
Mhm. Yeah, and I for the longest time, very old, but I watched Julia Child for the longest time.
Mm,
And that was a lot of the early technique that I learned, or even now, she's probably the best reference I've ever had for cooking because she was not some celebrity chef. She was probably the first celebrity chef, but she was just a really good chef. Just a really good,
yeah,
really
that
well-known chef.
she wasn't a I think
Yeah,
the difference on her is she
like a
wasn't a
star.
fancy chef either, that
Yeah,
the things
yeah.
that she made were things that
Mhm.
people could make at home with her, and that was the point, and that's why it resonated so well,
Yes.
because it wasn't just aspirational viewing, it could
Mhm.
be collaborative viewing and interactive
Right.
viewing, and even if you're not doing it at the
Mhm.
same time, you could, like, record the episode and then play it back later and
She
do it,
writes it
or
down
you could
and yeah,
then remember, "Oh, I saw this technique when I watched Julia Child," because it's not something
right.
that's just gonna be used in a five-star kitchen.
Mhm.
It's something that I can do with the
Yeah.
tools I have here in my basic everyday kitchen.
Right, and that's huge because, most other cooking shows, even ones today, they don't go over technique or, like, why you're doing something. They just go, "Okay, put this in, and to save time, use this bagged thing," and I understand that, like, everyone loves quick, speedy meals, right? But I'm people are spending so much time thinking about how to save time that they're, like, throwing away technique and things that might actually make you enjoy this food a lot more in this, for saving time. And I think there are times when you should do that and times when you shouldn't. So I really liked just learning straight up cooking for the sake of making the best possible tasting meal. And that's what Julia's cooking was all about. And her show,
Mm,
the best thing about it was that it was about technique and reasons why, So she would be tying up a chicken a certain way to bake it. And she would say, okay, the reason why I'm pulling the legs this direction and then tying them here and then putting this over the ends is because XYZ. Other ways you could do it are this or this or that. And she would explain so much. You would learn so much from like one episode of her show that it was crazy. So I watched every single episode of her show. To
how
this
many
day,
is that?
oh, it's a
That has
lot.
to be a
It's a lot.
lot.
It's a lot. But when I eat, this is a fun fact about me. When I eat, I always watch something. I
Mhm.
never just sit there and eat. I'm always watching something. And my favorite thing to watch is some sort of cooking show while I'm eating. And I just always do that, and that was like that's my default. If I don't have another show I'm actively watching, I will default to just like watching a cooking show or something, or a food show, or a travel and eat show, whatever it is. And so watching her stuff, I was able to get through it because I just watched it while I was eating for years. But I learned so much, and then she would make things that I'd be like, okay, well, I'm a picky eater, I'm not into that, but that was cool to know. And then sometimes she'd make something and I'd be like, oh my god, I want that so badly. So I would save that episode. I would go back through it and I would write down what she did and I'd watch her technique and her explanations really carefully and I'd go and replicate it. So now a lot of my favorite things to make at home are specifically her recipes that I've just tweaked a little bit.
Mm, mhm.
But they came from almost everything that I make for myself that's like comfort food, that's like a staple for me, came from one of her recipes always. And it's
Mm.
like stuff that I cook for other people and they're like, "Oh my god, Giga, this is amazing." You invite people over and they're like, "Holy shit." I'm like, "Well, it's literally just, I did what the French lady did." I did what she did and it worked.
That's
But I
super
love her
cool.
videos. I love cooking. Yeah. And it translates like you said into like my streams. So when I watch food videos, I basically tried to make everything. I've tried every cooking technique at least once. And I'm into food prep as well. Like I know how to butcher animals and all this stuff. I've learned it down to food safety and every little bit of it because I was just interested in all parts of it. And it's at the point now where when I watch someone do something on a cooking show, I know what they're doing and I know why they're doing it and I understand it. So now I'm like, I have so much to say. So when I'm on stream and someone's making a sandwich, I'm
But
like,
that makes
okay,
it
well, I
super
would use
engaging
this
of just
cheese.
not many
Yeah.
people can make just sustained engaging content out of watching food videos the way you do, because
Right.
most people don't have that knowledge. So that's another thing of
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was another meta decision of yours, but
Mm.
it's something that I is unique to you, or at the very least, I have
Mhm.
not seen any other VTubers as of yet that
Right.
that have actively discussed food preparation and cooking to the detail that you have, that
Yeah.
I've seen people watching the same channels that you've watched in
Yeah.
like media share nights and
Mhm.
whatnot, but
Right.
that
And they'll be like,
they
"That
don't
looks
have that
great."
type of commentary. And
Yeah.
that's why you're able to make, and that's part of what really sort of drew my eyes to it, of just thinking about tonight of I need to make sure I talk to
Yeah.
GEEGA about cooking.
Yeah, and like you said, like, not to for me, not to trash on other streamers or anything, but I do notice, because I watch a lot of other VTubers and I'm friends with a lot of them. When I watch a lot of other VTubers talk over food videos, it's a lot of them just being in awe at how much they want to eat that food. And it's good because chat can share that emotion. It's very
Yeah.
relatable, but there's not much else that they actually
Yeah,
say.
you can only do that for so long before it gets
Right.
repetitive.
Yeah, yeah, and or they'll watch people trying out snacks and they'll be like, "That looks cool. I've never seen that." Wow. You know, it's like they don't have that many unique words that
Yeah.
come out of their
But
mouth
since you're able to
when they
actually make
watch it.
the specific
Yeah,
commentary about every video, that it keeps
right.
that unique. You
Yeah,
mentioned
and mm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's it wasn't planned, you know. I just watched food videos because I was like, you know, I love food. It'd be nice to share this with everyone. And then I realized how much I could say, and I was like, okay, I should keep doing this.
And
So
people seem to
I do
enjoy
think so.
it.
Yeah, I'm glad they do, because I worry. I'm one of those people, like I said, I talk a lot. I talk a lot, and I worry sometimes that I get so deep into certain topics that I'm like, am I gonna lose people as I get really into like a meta discussion about why you pick certain cheeses over others for this type of sandwich, or you know, what's the importance of mayo and why everyone should know, you know? Like, I'm like, I don't know if this is too much, but I've learned over time that it's not an issue at all, and people like when you share knowledge. They like to learn things. They like to know things. So long as you don't have the most monotone voice, you know? Like,
Yeah.
they enjoy that sort of content. So I no longer worry about any of that. I just say whatever's on my brain. And I'll even pause a food video in the middle of it to discuss like their bread choice or something, because I know that there's going to be more topics that come up as I watch it. So sometimes I'll have to
Like,
pause a
wait, I
video
need to get this
to
off
go
my
through
chest
it.
right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that my chat's okay with that, that they're cool with that.
So, here's your opportunity. Do
Mm.
you have a pet topic in food? Like, this is your opportunity to soapbox, whether it be, you know, about
Yeah.
picking certain cheeses or something hyper niche. Do you have that one topic that you're very adamant about in your cooking or
Yes.
in food consumption, that just you
Absolutely.
know is very niche, but that
Okay.
that it is your thing, your moment,
Yeah.
your soapbox? What is it for you?
This goes into health and what people cook to be healthy. I see people all the time when they watch food videos, they complain about like the healthiness of what they're watching, you know? And they're like, "Oh, they use so much, it's always oil and fat." Okay? They're like, "Oh, they use so much oil," or, "Oh my god, there's so much fat on that meat. I'm glad that they trimmed off that excess," and blah blah blah, you know? And people are always complaining about oil and fat. Here's my take. This is more of a health thing, but it relates to cooking. You should cook whatever you want. You should make everything drown in oil and drown in butter. It's going to cook better. It's going to taste better. And then what you should do is throw away carbs. Carbs and bread, you still have them, but in very small amounts. And people always, I don't know why they hyper focus on oil and fat. And you see it the most when they're watching cooking videos. They're doing this exact thing, right? They'll watch people cook and they're like, "Oh, that there's so much fat on the rind of that meat. That's crazy. And oh, it looks so greasy in the pan." And they're like, "That's so unhealthy." And they act like that's the thing that's going to make you cause weight. It's not. It's not. It's carbs first. It's simpler sugars and things that break down more easily, like regular carbohydrates. So people, I don't know why everyone's of this frame of mind that like fat and oil is so bad for you and greasy food is unhealthy, and I don't know. They're so convinced of this, but I think that you should let yourself be free when you cook, and you should use shit tons of butter in everything and just eat less bread and less pasta. That's it. You'll be fine. You can cook whatever you want and you can eat whatever you want so long as you cut the carbs in half. That's my big opinion, because I don't know. I see people freak out so much when they see a chef squirt like a bunch of oil into a pan before doing a steak. But the thing is, like, the only way to properly cook meat at high heat is to put a shit ton of oil or fat in the pan. Like it's the only way to do it well. So when you watch like 5-star chefs do cooking, they'll always give the same advice and they'll be like, oh yeah, use a lot of oil, and they'll drown that shit, you know, and they'll be like, okay, now I'm putting a knob of butter in at the end to baste it. They baste it with the butter, you know? Like whenever you eat really high quality food, it's just butter, you know, it's just covered in oil and butter. So then I see people complaining about their dry ass chicken and, oh, I'm not losing weight, but they're still eating a lot of bread. And I'm like, come on. You can eat whatever fatty food you want and really enjoy yourself, eat really hearty stuff if you just didn't have all that bread, bro. And that's my thing.
Pachi, 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 pachi. Very good soapbox. Very good rant.
I feel so strongly about it because it, like I said, it ties into science, it ties into health, and it ties into understanding how your body digests stuff. And in this is why we don't grow wheat in the underworld. Now I still love bread. Don't get me wrong. The average, especially Americans, the average American diet has so many carbohydrates, and carbs break down into simple sugars very easily and very quickly, and your body stores that shit so fast. But if you eat a high fat diet, almost like a paleo diet, but not full paleo, you know, like just leaning toward it, where you're just very like meat and vegetable oriented.
Yeah.
You can have so much fat in your diet because if you don't have
part
those
of it is
carbohydrates,
sort
you
of
need that.
food industry propaganda starts at a young age with the food pyramid. The base is
Yes.
carbs. It's all carbs at the base.
Yeah, and carbs are cheap. So, you know, in America, they promote carbs because it's like so easy to produce. And what are our major exports? Like wheat and corn, right? And soybeans. So, I'm pretty sure those are the top three. So it makes a lot of sense that there's a lot of propaganda for that. And it really, yeah, depending on when you were born, especially, people who were born in like the 80s and early 90s really focused on the food pyramid in school. I know nowadays they kind of
we've learned, and part of it isn't. I'd imagine maybe some sliver of it is big wheat, big bread industry stuff. But I think part of it is actually just an evolving knowledge of nutrition and whatnot. I don't actually think it is, but I think that's why. I think that's why there's that perception, because there's still just so many people who grew up with the food pyramid being taught, and just it's a very simple concept, which is why it's taught as a child, and it's something that you remember, and that's probably why we have those preconceived notions that even if we now, on a scientific level, know are not entirely accurate, that the average person is not necessarily going to learn that information unless they're, you know, really interested in nutrition.
Yeah. And it's like you said, like you get that food pyramid in front of a kid, that visual, having a chart in front of them, that's going to be burned into their memory much more than if they're a teenager and in their later years someone goes, actually, blah, blah, blah. Like they're
and the concept of a food pyramid isn't a bad thing. That I think it's a great teaching tool. And it's just that what we knew at that point in time was not actually as healthy as we thought it to be. That the idea of, okay, you know, helping a child learn at a young age, all right, this is what you want to have a balanced diet. That's a very smart thing to do as a society. That's a very practical thing to do. And it's just a little unfortunate that for years on end, for decades on end, that what we had at the base, we now realize, oh wait, that's actually where a lot of the
very bad.
Oops.
Yeah. They figured out over time that, you know, these complex carbohydrates break down into the same sugar that they put at like the bad part of the pyramid.
Yeah.
When they were like, it used to be, oh, sugar's bad. It's all sugar. You can't have sugar, right? And so people were like, oh, stay off the Twinkies, you know? They would say stuff like that, and they would demonize things with a lot of sugar. So then they started going, okay, well, this is low sugar. And then the next thing that got demonized was fat. So now you see all these things that are like low sugar, low fat.
What you know at the time, and the idea of, all right, you know, it's fat on the meat. So it, you know, sort of makes sense that we would infer that's how we get fat. And that this is bread, this is fluffy, this is light, this is, you know, is sort of air. It's like water or something. It's filling, it's cheap. So that's what you base your diet off of. That it's entirely logical how we got to where we got.
Right.
even if it
And
was
then
misinformed.
yeah, the progression makes a lot of sense. It really does, and I get why people are on the mindsets that they are. But we're at the point, we're at the point now that we know like the healthy diet is meat and vegetables, a little bit of carb, and you'll be fine. And basically, within that meat and vegetable range, you can eat whatever you want, so long as the quantities are held where they need to be and the balancing is where it needs to be. You know,
Yeah.
your plate can't be 90% meat and 10% like one stick of asparagus, like
Yeah.
it needs to be balanced. But yeah, that's like the thing that bothers me the most. And like I said, it's not just like an education thing, it's a people perpetuate it because when you see them watching food videos and talking over them and they demonize the meat and oil that they see on screen because of all the fats that they're thinking of.
Yeah.
And then it makes people watching go, yeah, the fat's bad, and it just keeps it going. So instead, when we watch food videos, you hear me instead like loving the butter that I see on screen or being like, oh, they should have added more butter, And it's just how it is. It's the way of the world. Butter is fine, bread bad.
And there you go.
Although
Do
I love
you
bread.
I know your favorite meal, you've said multiple times on stream, is shrimp scampi.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have like a top 5 that kind of are all kind of the same level, and shrimp scampi is one of them. That's one of those things that not only is it one of my favorite foods, but it's like it's really like quick and easy to make. So when I would be at home and I wouldn't know what to eat, but I just really want something good. I want something that I like, and I want something familiar and comfortable,
Yeah.
It's always shrimp scampi. It's
Mhm.
always. And as much as I like making it with fresh shrimp, I've always got frozen shrimp in the freezer, which honestly are really good. They're
Yeah.
really good as they are.
Now, I
So
remember I shared one of
yeah.
my quick meal just
Oh
sort of
yeah.
strategies in your chat
Mhm.
when it came to frozen shrimp, and said
Yeah,
whenever I
yeah.
make instant ramen or something, that I
Mhm.
throw in just frozen shrimp from the freezer,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
one, it cools it down. It's that way, I'm not using ice cubes and getting just a bunch of water in there. So it
Right.
cools down the
Mhm.
ramen. It self thaws the shrimp, and it just
Right.
cooks the shrimp right there, and that it adds a bit
Yeah.
of protein there, and yeah.
So good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, is any way you could like sneak protein into it like you
Hmm.
want to. I know a lot of people throw egg in. I'm a fan of I throw cheese in my ramen actually. This is
Ooh.
something that I learned in uh from Korea basically. It's not a thing outside of Korea, although some Korean brands will do it here, and that's kind of how you can like learn about it. But cheesy ramen and cheesy spicy things are huge in Korea. So it's really common for them to make ramen and then throw slices of cheese in it, just melt it in there. And what they do in Korea a lot of the time is I know with instant ramen in America, people will eat the ramen straight out of the pot or the bowl that they have it in, right? And they'll kind of drink the broth at the same time. In Korea, what you do is you make a huge pot of ramen, you throw it in between people, and you take the noodles out. And people often use the pot lid for this, or you have tiny plates, and you just eat the noodles without much of the broth or the soup. You just eat the noodles themselves, and that's when you throw the cheese on it. So you throw cheese on top of it while it's still in the broth, and you let it melt just a little bit, and then you grab that chunk of noodles with the cheese on it, throw it onto your little plate, so it has some broth on it, but not a ton, and you eat it like that. So it's like very cheesy noodles with a little broth, and it's so insanely good.
Mm.
It's so amazing.
Yeah, I usually
I
have my
love it.
ramen without much water.
Mm.
That I usually have it
Yeah.
there to help, have the
Mhm.
extra heat to melt and cook the shrimp, but then I pour out the
Right.
water and have it just as the noodles and the shrimp.
Yeah.
One of my
It's better
biggest
that way.
food confessions, which
Mm.
it's not that I think it's bad, it's just that for whatever reason, my personal palate, I don't like it.
Mm.
I have never enjoyed melted cheese. I don't enjoy macaroni and cheese. The one exception is I'm fine with
Oh,
pizza, but I don't like, like gooey
that's a big
melted cheese.
deal.
I think it's probably
Oh.
a consistency thing for me, because I don't
Okay.
mind like
Okay.
blocks of cheese necessarily, and like small amounts, or like cheese and crackers, that's okay. It's
Okay.
melted cheese for me. It's the consistency and the
Ooh.
smell for whatever reason. It
Oh.
it makes my stomach churn.
I
Um,
can
and it's not a thing of like,
understand it.
I don't
Mhm.
think cheese is a bad food. It's not, "Oh, this is disgusting. How could anyone eat it?" It's just for whatever
Yeah.
reason, my particular nose does not like it.
Interesting. I wonder if it's like the way some people are grossed out by warm milk. Like,
Possibly, I don't
you
know.
know what I mean? I think we think about milk and cheese and things like that as things that spoil easily.
Yeah, it's
And
not a thing of spoil. It's like I said,
dairy,
just like
mhm,
it smells
just something
weird
about
to me.
it.
But then on the other hand, I
Yeah.
adore the smell of a fish market. A lot of people, just hate the smell
Ooh.
of fish. I love the smell of
No, no, no,
fish.
no, 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 no. Ooh. This is something I talk about on stream a lot. I know shrimp scampi is one of my favorite foods. I love seafood so long as it is shrimp or lobster. I do not like anything that smells like or tastes like seawater. You know, like that very
Mm,
oceany flavor. There are a lot of people that love that, so they like really fishy fish
yeah,
because they want that like taste of the sea, right? That
mhm.
makes me want to die. I can't do it. So like one of my most hated foods is seaweed. You know, they put nori on top of
Oh,
everything and around
I enjoy
everything.
seaweed. That I look
Ugh,
that just yeah. I feel like everyone
no,
has
it's
their one
crunchy
thing.
seawater. Oh,
I feel like
yeah.
everyone has that one thing that just for whatever reason
Mhm.
they just don't like, that just their
Yeah.
body physically almost rejects. And for
Mhm,
you, it's
mhm.
seafood. For me, it's
Yeah.
cheese.
Oh,
I do need to ask though. So you said shrimp and
mhm.
lobster. I need to ask because
Yeah.
this is something I've been very open about. I am from the state of Maryland, so
Oh, okay. Yeah,
crabs
there's a
are
lot of
adjacent
yeah.
to shrimp and lobster. Do you
Mhm.
enjoy crabs, or is there something that is different about them for you?
They're a little more seawater fishy tasting than shrimp or lobster, but it really depends on the variety of crab. It really depends on how they were raised. Because if you raise one like in a tank,
Yeah,
right? And you have salt water that you're
yeah,
putting them
and
in, but
there's
they're
going to be a
farm
difference
raised, they're not gonna
between
taste like that.
just different
Yeah,
types of crabs. That I'm from Maryland,
right.
so Maryland blue crabs for me
Mhm.
are the truth.
Yeah,
Alaskan
yeah,
king
yeah.
is good. Snow crabs are okay. That I've never had a crab that I genuinely didn't like.
Yeah.
But
I
if
have
you've ever had a chance to have Maryland blue
yes.
crabs with
Yes, I
Old
have.
Bay,
Yeah. Yeah. I
that's the
have
thing that
also had
I've pushed Old Bay
mhm.
spices on
Oh, yeah.
basically any time I get a guest that has food
Mm.
talks. I always ask, do you know about Old Bay? And
Oh,
it sounds like you know about Old Bay, so I
I'm an
don't need
Old
to
Bay
go on my
truther.
soapbox. There you go.
Yeah,
Awesome. Love it.
I have been to Maryland several times. I've been everywhere. I've been absolutely everywhere, but I have been to Maryland and eaten a few times. And in particular, something that was really good was there was a place that made crab cakes that
Mm-hmm.
did like the most banger crab cakes you could imagine. Banger.
Yeah.
So amazing. And it was like at some outdoor normal event and they were selling it in a stall. So I don't even know what the business was. It was just someone that goes around and they're like, "We caught this morning," you know, and then they just make it on the spot. Oh, it was so good. It was amazing. Oh my god. Yeah, no, there's and thing is I'm usually not the most, crab person in the world. Really depends on how
Yeah, and
seawatery it
crabs are not
tastes.
even, crabs are a special thing, that
Mhm.
it's a luxury food to be sure. It's not something
Right.
that even in Maryland you're not eating it all the time. It's just
Yeah,
something that
and it takes so much effort, so much
oh
time.
yeah.
Like,
It it's a
if you go
social
to a crab
event.
place and they give you, like, just crabs, they put them in front of you and you've
Yeah,
gotta
and
take the
that you
shells
have
off
to
yourself.
pick you have to pick them.
Oh my
But that's the
god,
best because
it's
'cause they're the
so
freshest,
much.
but you always do it with friends, that it's a social event, you're always talking
Right,
in
right.
between bites and everything, plus it
Mhm.
means that you're inherently pacing yourself because there is a
Yeah.
physical limit to how fast you can eat anyways, so,
Mhm.
it just becomes a thing of, you and whoever you're with, friends or family, just talk
Right.
and pick away at crabs for a couple hours, and,
Yeah.
it's something that, uh, when my family goes on vacation, usually, like, in the summer, that's a
Yeah.
very, like, special thing that I look forward to doing just the once every year.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, yeah. I like that sort of thing. I have caught my own shrimp. I have caught my own lobster before. I've pulled up cages from the ocean,
Mhm.
and done that whole sort of thing. And it's like really rewarding doing the whole process and then eating it
Yeah.
that night. Some people find that a little gruesome, but I enjoy it. I like that process. But yeah, I know Maryland blue crab for sure. Old Bay, I'm an Old Bay truther. I actually one of my favorite things. So I'm a dark meat supremacist. I believe that if you eat chicken
Yes. Oh,
or
absolutely.
turkey, yeah, you got to do the dark meat. And one of my favorite really cheap, really easy foods that I do sometimes is I bake chicken legs. I get the whole chicken leg, so the drumstick and the thigh still attached together.
Mm-hmm.
Throw those into a pan, and I just rub a shit ton of spices all over it on the top and bottom, and then bake them.
Mm-hmm.
And Old Bay is within the spices that I put on them, because I used to make a spice blend that involved a lot of things that were already in Old Bay. So I was like, you know what? I should use their blend and then add my other stuff that's not in it to it. And I do, and it's so good. I do add extra paprika though, because I could eat paprika straight with a spoon. Like I love it so much. So
I suppose for people who aren't familiar with it, Old Bay is a spice blend that is originated in Maryland. It's now owned by McCormick, which is just, Spice Giant. You can buy it in any Target, Walmart, what have you. It's in this iconic yellow container, and the main ingredients are celery salt, red pepper, black pepper, and paprika. There's a bunch of other things combined in it to make the proprietary blend, but those are the building blocks you're working with. And it's most well known for being put on seafood, specifically crabs, but it is an allspice. It's something that you can put on chicken, on meat, on popcorn, that people from Maryland will literally put it on whenever. It's a meme in Maryland. It is a stereotype, and I am here to say the stereotype is 100% true.
Do you want to know the secret sauce? Let me tell you the secret about, this is what I've done with Old Bay. So you said popcorn. This is a really good thing. Old Bay is one of those things that actually goes really well with sweet stuff if you play it right.
It has to be very small amounts because it's a strong spice.
Oh, yeah. You just put a tiny bit. If you make kettle corn, you make popcorn that is salty and sweet, you put sugar in it, and then you throw some Old Bay in it. Oh, it is so good. It is so good.
I am a big fan of the sweet salty paradigm.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I feel like that's the perfect blend. So I always made kettle corn for myself because I like popcorn as it is, but I feel like with like a little sugar, it's just right, Or sometimes I would make my own caramel even and do that. But I started doing kettle corn with a little Old Bay occasionally, and oh my God, that is the secret sauce. That's the one. That is the one. You've got to try it if you have the ability.
Because I've had popcorn, like I mentioned, little Bay. I don't know if I've ever had specifically kettle corn, but now that you mentioned it, I'm kind of like, why haven't I done this before?
Yeah, do just a little bit of salt, a good amount of sugar, like the amount you would normally need for a standard kettle corn, and then some Old Bay. Oh my God. You have to get the balancing just right. It's very easy to do it wrong and just get weird.
Oh yeah, that's the corn, tricky thing with spices in general, and especially when you have something that is strong, whether it be an Old Bay or just pepper or something strong. Knowing that right pinch to do, because it's always all right. Little pinch, not enough. A little bit more, not enough. A little bit more. Oh God, too much.
Yeah, it's very suddenly. It's way too much. Yeah, you have to really experiment with the amounts, but I got it down pat, and it is. I haven't done it in a long time. I haven't actually. Now I'm gonna write it down as a thing to make because it's been a while. But you saying Old Bay and then saying popcorn, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good, so good.
Do you have any creations that you are particularly proud of in that they are either really offbeat, that you've made something that you think people would think at a glance is really weird and might not think to try it, or is there some sort of innovation that you found of, there's this classic dish, but if you change these one or two things, it takes it to the next level?
Yeah. One dish that I've mentioned that I kind of make is I make short ribs a lot. There's this hearty dish. It comes from an old Julia Child's recipe where she was doing a classic French beef stew, and I made her recipe and slowly over time kept changing it, and now I've got this like perfect balance where I also added a lot of Italian influence with a shit ton of tomato. So basically she makes these short ribs that she slow cooks in a Dutch oven, and the base of the sauce or the liquid that she braises them in basically for like several hours, it's a little bit of tomato paste, a lot of beef broth, and a good amount of red wine, and then several spices in there as well. So you braise it in that for several hours in a Dutch oven, and it comes out really great, really tender. And then she made it with like stew, so she put in like carrots and potatoes and celery and onions and that kind of stuff, right? What I do is I make this, instead of throwing it in a Dutch oven and throwing it in the oven, I just leave the Dutch oven on the stove and I let it simmer. So it's like, it's still braising, but it's similar. And instead of making a very liquidy sauce with all this broth and everything, just take a jar. Now, I don't always do this the fast way like this, but when you don't want to get your spice blend right and do all that extra work and you need it to happen fast, just get a jarred sauce, a tomato sauce that has a lot of flavor thrown in it already, and throw that whole jar into the pot, and then a
And just have
little
it
bit
be
of
the
beef broth and a
base.
little bit of wine. Yeah, so you get this really thick base. Because what you want to do is you want to cook this down, right? You want to cook this sauce
Yeah.
down after the meat's done, so that it becomes a slightly thicker sauce, but still kind of stewy. It's still kind of liquidy.
Yeah, but you're basically just
Instead, I skip
starting
that.
with the thicker consistency
Right.
anyways.
Yeah, so I put in like tomato paste, so I get this really hearty tomato base. And then if you, like I said, if you want to do it really fast, you just throw a whole jar of tomato sauce in there, and then about a third that amount of beef broth and red wine. And you just cook that. You just braise short ribs in that. And it's like really, it's a shortcut by using the tomato sauce, but it's so good. It's so ridiculously good. And then you just throw that on pasta. I don't put the other stew elements in because I don't like I'm not a fan of like the carrots, potatoes, and celery and onions thing in a stew. I just don't like them when they're like cooked in liquid. I don't know. I was just never a fan of that. So I always took those out from the beginning. So I think that kind of got me where I ended up. But it is so good. Now, if you don't take shortcuts, I really like to make it the main way, which is tomato paste and then building your own spice blend and doing your
just
whole thing.
work the flavors from the ground up.
Yeah, and you cook it down a lot more. You have more liquid in it, and it's more stew-like. I like doing that. But if you're trying to be real quick, yeah, it's gonna need to cook for a while, but you want your prep time to be really fast. That's the one that I think is a little unconventional. Is like taking tomato sauce, mixing it with other liquids, and then cooking meat in it. It's just not a thing that that people do very often. They usually use, especially like a jarred sauce, if it's not one you, or even if you make sauce yourself. Sometimes I'll like make it and freeze it and have it for a long time. Even if it's your own made thing, just taking a pre-made sauce and cooking that down is like not the intended use of it usually. But I find that it's really good, really, really good for like braising a meat. So that is my that's my special, I guess, tidbit or or whatever I would call it. I've done that with a lot of different meats. Short ribs are the best one in it though, for sure.
I feel like slow cookers and air fryers have become a trend lately.
Yeah.
Do you believe they are as good as they are hyped up to be? Because I do not own either, but I've been looking into both, and I'm curious about your opinions on them.
I like slow cookers. However, I'm a proponent of just buying a Dutch oven that you can use as a pot anytime, dual purpose,
Yeah.
and then just slow cooking stuff in your oven at a low heat. Like, it's the same thing, However, if you're going to leave the house and you have a gas stove and you don't want to like leave the oven on like that, you know what I mean? Like, if you're scared of that sort of thing, then yeah, the slow cooker is like 1% safer. But I'm a proponent of not doing that. And then with the air fryer, I'm not into air fryers. Like I said, I'm a person who embraces oils and fats very much so. So I would say, nah, just deep fry that shit right in your kitchen. Just just deep fry it and eat better in all other ways, I'm a proponent of that, but I also don't eat a ton of fried food. So for me, it's like, that's an easy thing for me to say. I think if you fry a lot of stuff, then maybe it's better. But doesn't it still use oil in some way?
I
don't
think maybe, like I said, I don't own one, so I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. It seems to me like it's a gimmick that they make you think it's a lot healthier than it is, That's my thought. It probably still is a little healthier, but I don't think it's that much healthier. So my thought on like the air fryers and slow cookers is that they're not bad, but for air fryers, just fry that stuff anyway. And for slow cookers, just buy a thick cast iron pot and use your oven. That's my thoughts on that.
You mentioned you caught lobsters and shrimp and other things, and you mentioned that you've tried a lot of different animals, and you've actually done field dressing of animals before. That you are knowledgeable in all these different methods of taking the entire animal, whether it be fish, shellfish, or mammal, and being able to actually prepare it from scratch. What is the most difficult animal you have ever had to prepare from scratch?
Oh, hands down, bear. Simply because it is so big. It is so big, and it's really tough to cut through.
So are we
It's
talking, just like sort of
so much
forest, brown
physical
bear, black
effort.
bear type of stuff, I
Yeah.
suppose?
Right. Exactly. It like black bear. It's so difficult and it takes so long to get through. Oh my god. And it's a tough meat in general. The muscles are very tough. So even if you know right where to cut and you're like, "Oh, this is how I separate this from that." Just doing the cutting that you think you're supposed to do is really hard.
Mm.
Really, really hard. So that one's definitely cumbersome. And then anything small and delicate, like if you're doing little, I wouldn't say frogs, but you know what I mean, like something
Yeah.
like that small, like
Just
what a
the fact that you
pain.
have to be so precise with it all.
Yeah, or you ruin it.
Hmm.
You ruin the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
It's like when you try
that's
to
the
pull the
advantage
crab
of
meat out of a
crabs.
leg and you only pull half of it, right?
Oh yeah, well that,
But it breaks.
yeah, but at the very least, you can still break the shell and get the rest out of it. That
Yeah,
it's not
right.
ruined. It's just okay. If
Mhm.
you can get that clean pull, it's great. But
Right,
like you said, with a frog or something else that's small, that if
right.
you're trying to repair it and do it wrong, you can
You
actually just
got
waste the
you
whole
messed the
thing.
whole
And it's
thing
like,
up.
ugh.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I don't know. Most things are not that bad. They're just iterations of similarly shaped animals. So if you've done a deer before, right? You've taken apart a deer. You could take apart an elk. There will be some differences, but not that much. And like they are all similar
Which
for the
animal
most
do you
part.
think you are the best at preparing? One that just like, you know it down flat. You could go on an assembly line and get this done.
Oh, really simple, but shrimp. I can
Mm,
take a like fresh, like a live shrimp and pare it down to its edible form in like 10 seconds. Less than that even. I just
yeah.
boom, like just like with my hands or with a knife or whatever, I can like pipeline that shit.
Yeah.
I could do so many of them
Because
like
I've done
assembly
shrimp before,
line.
and that it's
Mhm.
it's definitely probably the least complex
Delicate.
process, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they're a little bit slippery and just the shells can
Mhm.
sometimes break. But once you
Yeah.
know the motions, and it sounds weird and technical,
Mhm.
but just how to get the shell off cleanly without it breaking
Right.
into a million pieces is just
It's
it's
difficult.
a finesse skill that
Mhm.
you just learn through repetition, because you can't describe properly how to do it, because anyone can pull a tail off a shrimp, and
Yeah,
anyone who has
it's
pulled
not.
a tail off a shrimp knows that sometimes you get a good pull and sometimes you get a bad pull,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
being able
And
to
you
make it so you
ruin that
have it
whole
the
thing.
consistently good pull, and then just the slice
Yeah.
to get out the entrails, something that you were
Little
discussing
poop
on stream
vein.
the other day, of just those
Yeah.
little black spots going up the spine.
Mhm.
That's not just coloring your bones, that is waste, so cut that
Yes.
out.
Poopy vein. Yeah, it's that's one of those things that I can do really fast that it took me a while to get used to it, but you make it that nice slice right down the center along the back
Hmm.
and you pull the little poopy vein out. And I've gotten so good at it because the like I said way earlier, I nowadays I'm much less annoying about it, but I used to be really frugal. I would never buy cleaned and deveined shrimp because of the price difference. I would go,
Yeah,
well, I
they're
could just do it myself,
hmm
you know? And I learned how to do it so fast so that I wasn't also putting a lot of time cost in, because then sometimes
yeah,
it's worth it to pay for something that saves you time, right?
yeah,
Because it
but
depends on how
if
precious
you
your
can get
time
that
is.
skill, then it's just found money.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would buy uncleaned, not deveined, like nearly whole shrimp. They just like popped the heads off, and I would just I would just assembly line it myself. Or sometimes even the fresh shrimp with everything on them. I would just take them apart. And I learned how to do it so fast because of the amount of shrimp I ate, that at this point I could do it like speed of light.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Crazy fast.
Is there a dish that you want to make, but that you
Mm.
feel is beyond your current skill set?
Um the final frontier for me, like the only thing I haven't done a lot of, is real barbecue. Real barbecue. So like taking a brisket and leaving that, potentially smoking it, like doing it for
Mm,
like 8 hours, 12 hours, like that sort of thing, because there's so much skill that goes into regulating the temperature really evenly, and knowing when to boost that temperature up and down based off of how the meat like literally feels physically at that moment, and like that kind
yeah.
of stuff. There's a lot. there's a lot that goes into it. And so that's the sort of thing I want to learn. And on top of that, specifically like sausage making for the purpose of barbecue, for like slow cooking them and smoking them.
I assume
really
you've
wanna
seen
do
the
that.
YouTube channel Rate That Sausage.
Yes, I have.
That's one I feel
love
like
it.
you could get a good bit of mileage out of on just
Oh,
a
yeah.
media stream.
Yeah. I'll put that on the docket for sure. I know how to make certain kinds of sausages, like no problem. But smoking them, slow cooking them, and doing that whole process and getting them to be cooked properly and not dry when you do that, and retain the smoky flavor and have the outside be kind of crispy when it's done. Like, getting all of that right is way harder than people think when you're cooking it over a long time, you know? And especially when you're using equipment that you have to like put in a backyard or something, you know, and you've got like a big charcoal, whatever you've got, like a grill or a smoker. That's really skill based and experience based, you know? So that's the one thing that I think I haven't touched much that I would like to get into.
Yeah, because it's a very niche type of preparation. It's not necessarily one that is particularly complex, but like you said, it's one that you have to just get a feel for it, and that you have to be able to really get the experience over time of figuring it out. That there are best practices and guides and whatnot, but so much of it is really dependent on the exact just slice of meat that you are working with, because
Right.
even if slices of meat are going to be approximately the same weight, they're not in the same shape, and just the little intricacies of, all right, how fast is it going to cook is not something that you can 100% standardize in a book.
Yeah.
So you can say, all right, when it gets to this state, do this thing, but you need to keep an eye on it, like you said, to know when it's getting from state to state, and then being able to get
Like,
your
feel
eye
it
to a
out.
point where you know just before it gets to where it needs to be.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to learn. And think of how much time it takes to do one thing, right? If you're doing a brisket overnight and it takes 12 hours, then you have to put an entire day, 12 hours worth of checking it, into one potentially successful or maybe failure, you know, kind of project.
Yeah, it is a time-intensive thing.
Yeah, so if you want to grind this skill, then each time you make one of these is going to take you a whole day, you know? And that's a lot. So you think about other skills where it's like 10 minutes of practice a day is enough to be good in a month or something. It's like not like that.
It's
with
not an
barbecuing.
option.
Yeah, you just don't have the option. So that's the thing for me that I really would like to get into, but for obvious reasons haven't touched it yet.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing that I really want to do. I have done like open fire, like a pig roast and like stuff like that. Like that sort of thing. But that's not barbecuing. That's literally just cook something over a fire, you know?
Yeah.
It's different. Yeah.
Well, now I'm getting hungry from all this.
I know.
What is the most complex dish that you know how to make that is no longer complex for you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know. I can make a lot of like French food, things that involve like, you know, they sauce everything, right?
Yeah.
Everything in French cuisine is like sauce and blending like a lot of different flavors into one sauce. I'm really good at that sort of thing. I can't really give you a specific because they're like, you know, you just it's just a list of sauces that you have.
It's more a discipline that you've gotten really
Yeah.
experienced at.
Yeah, but things like that for sure. And then I actually I used to be my phone. All right, ignore them not moving. I used to be really into baking.
And baking is an alchemy unto itself.
Yeah. Sorry, my phone is restarting.
It's all good. We still
Ignore
hear
my
you.
face.
You're fine.
Yeah. But baking is something I'm really into. And there are a lot of recipes that you have to learn, like no matter how many times you learn them, you learn the techniques, but you're not going to remember like the amounts and the timing of everything, right? Like you're going to probably leave that written down on a piece of paper and then go back to it every time you make it. So with baking, there are some things that I've made enough times that I could just pull out the ingredients and make it. Yeah, I don't even need like all that stuff anymore. So that's that's one of those frontiers, I guess, where like I could say like, yeah, I can make some really complex stuff. And I really like I like meticulous baking. I don't really do it often anymore because I feel like I've been there, done that enough, and the time put in is a lot. But I like making really like complex baked treats that like take way too long because I like I like just like not necessarily do the decoration part, but like doing the same thing 8 times because you're making 8 of the same thing
Hmm.
and trying to get it consistent every time. I just really enjoy that kind of like rote work that goes into it.
Yeah, and like I said, I call baking an alchemy unto itself because one thing that people who don't do a lot of cooking or baking don't necessarily realize is that they're entirely different disciplines in the world of food because
Yeah.
of not just the ingredients, but also the inherent concepts that go into preparing them. That uh, in baking, there's just a whole science of
Hmm.
how different things work together on a actual chemical level of just yeast and all these other things, like how fast something rises, how long something has to set for, and just when you're
Right.
layering things, where air is going. And it's so exact that
Yeah. It's a
baking
lot.
is much easier to ruin than most
Hmm.
other forms of cooking.
Yeah. Usually when oh, there we go.
Ah, you're
Phone.
back.
There we go. Sorry, my phone restarted for some reason. Usually when you're cooking, if you do something wrong, there's still a way you could finagle it to be okay, or a way you could bring it back from the dead. Um, and in baking, it's just not possible. Like you got to throw it out and go again.
Yeah, that just
You know?
the mix has been spoiled. It is
Yeah.
just, but like I said, on a chemical level, something has gone wrong in that even if you try to cook it from there, it will
Hmm.
not end well
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's like, especially a lot of things that you do wrong, you don't find out that you did wrong
until the
until.
end.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll bake bread and everything seems right, the dough seems right, everything looks correct. You bake it, you pull it out of the oven, and the crumb structure is all wrong. There were supposed to be air holes, there are no air holes.
Yeah,
And you're like, "Oh shit." And you spent all that time and you could never know at the dough phase that that was the case. You would never know. You only find out after you bake it. So that's one of the things with baking is like
yeah.
it's this long
If you ever want to
intensive
feel like a
thing.
wizard who's
Mhm.
brewing potions, try your hand at baking.
Yeah, that's literally how it feels. And you'll adjust something. You'll be like, oh, I put too much baking powder, so I should put less next time. And you find that out by doing it in tiny increments, like what the right amount is. You it's so little the change that you make between each recipe before you finally get it right, and it feels like you make the same thing 1,000 times and then finally it's right, and it like took 3 years of your life and you're like, finally my brownies are good.
Yeah.
It's like it's a lot.
Mm. Is there a particular pastry or, baking creation that you have really honed your skills at?
Honestly, just chocolate chip cookies.
Classics for a reason.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, I love them, but I hate the way everyone makes them. Honestly, most chocolate chip cookies that I buy I don't like, they're just not right. So the ones that I make at home, I spent so much time figuring out the right recipe. And you know which recipe is like the closest to being perfect? Honestly, it's just the one on the back of like any
Of the
Nestle Toll
Yep,
House.
Toll House. Just the original Toll House
Yeah,
recipe
yeah. It's
is
really
it's
close. Yeah.
it's kind of absurd
Mhm.
how just good that recipe is.
Yeah.
There are plenty of other good recipes out there that are going to
Mhm.
be much more complex, but
Yeah.
just somebody stumbled
Amazing.
upon something very special that day in that Toll House, and just you talk
Yeah.
about humanity's greatest mistakes and
Mhm.
just the most miraculous moments in different disciplines. The accident of the chocolate chip cookie may well
Yeah.
be the single greatest accidental revolution in baking.
Yeah. It's so great. It's so great. And it's like, chocolate back in the day at one point became really trendy. and it was very expensive because of how hard it was to get cocoa beans. It was like a very fancy French
Yeah.
nobility sort of thing,
Mhm.
chocolate.
It was a
So
delicacy. It was a,
yeah. Mhm.
I'm looking for the right word and missing it, but bottom line is, it was expensive.
Yeah.
It was
Right,
something that
right.
you could not get easily or cheaply.
Exactly. So the idea of baking chocolate chips into a very simple cookie that was just flour and sugar and butter, like nothing fancy, was like a heinous crime because it was so expensive back then. So yeah, the fact that it was a literal accident that someone accidentally dropped chocolate chips in
So
the
I heard it
mixer,
different. The way I heard it was that,
Mm.
the the patron or the guest had asked for chocolate
Yeah.
cookies, and that the chef
Ah,
put in the chips thinking that they would
mhm,
melt into the dough and then, sort of be
right.
absorbed into the dough as a whole, and that you would then just get a, dark brown cookie,
Yeah, yeah.
and that they did not, in fact, melt into it, but stayed
But
embedded
turned
in the
out
dough.
yeah, yeah. See, yeah, there are multiple stories. The one
Yeah,
that I had
and
heard was
but
that
I could believe that
they
story
thought they
just
were
as
putting
easily.
something else in.
It's
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing of folklore, but one thing that
right.
all of the myths agree upon is that something unintentional happened that
Mhm.
day.
Right, right. And that's I mean, how great is that? It's literally the most common, the most popular thing that there is as far as baked goods. It's the first thing that everyone learns how to bake,
Yeah,
you know? So that's yeah, it really carried over really well from yeah, just like some sort of mistake that happened. So good. So good.
yeah,
But I it's my favorite thing to bake because it's simple. I always have the ingredients. All those ingredients are easy to store for like forever. And so, anytime I'm like, I want something sweet, but I don't feel like going out and getting something sweet. I can just pull, cookies out of nowhere and make them
yeah.
happen.
Do you have any stories of mistakes that you've made that then turned out a lot better than you expected them to?
Ooh. Oh yeah, I was making bread. I was making just a very simple like similar to Italian bread, like that kind of like long loaf.
Yeah,
And it was one of my earlier times making it. And I was trying to prove the dough. And it was very
I suppose
cold, so I
for the
needed
people who don't know, what is
yeah.
proving the dough?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you make the dough, you need to leave it somewhere slightly warm and covered so that the yeast in the dough has time to metabolize and it creates gas, it creates air pockets within the dough. And then when you bake it, that creates those big chunky air pockets in the bread and makes it very like light and fluffy. So proving is the process of letting the yeast do that because when you bake the bread, you kill the yeast. So during the baking process, they're not going to be alive and well and create all of that air in the dough. It's just not going to happen. So you have to create your dough, mix the yeast with the things that they're going to eat in the dough, all those sugars, and then leave them there to do their thing. So that's proving. And there's usually like a nice window, like you want to prove it for X amount of time. And if you prove it too long, sometimes it messes up the texture. Sometimes it makes the taste very yeasty. It's like the equivalent of gamey meats, but for bread is
Yeah, that's a
when
good
bread tastes very
analogy. That's a good
yeasty.
analogy.
Yeah, yeah. So I had never had a bread that was very yeast intense before this point. So I left my bread to prove, and I needed some warm spot to put it because my house was extremely cold. So I put it on top of my UPS because I had a UPS attached to my computer because power would often flicker here and there, and it just enough to kill my computer. So I
Mm.
had a UPS that was running warm all the
Makeshift
time, which was
stovetop.
yeah, basically. So I actually put the dough right next to it, kind of like touching it to prove. And I forgot uh how long I was supposed to prove it for. So I ended up proving it like 3 times as long as I was supposed to.
Uh-oh.
And so it smelled really yeasty, really rank, and I was like, "Ugh, do I still bake it?" And the answer was yes, I still baked it. So I went and baked this bread and it turned out great. The texture was still perfect. There was so much air and everything, and it turned out very well. And that it had this like really, really intense flavor, but I liked that, and I did not know it yet that I liked it until I had it, and I
Mm.
was like, "Ooh, okay, I enjoy this sort of thing." And then after that, that's what made me get into like sourdough breads and stuff,
Okay, yeah,
and
because I
having your
suppose
own yeast starter,
of
and
flavor names that people might know that when you say yeasty bread, that's
yeah.
usually what you get with sourdough.
Right. Yeah, sourdough has that sort of flavor. And yeah, I got into it after that from my mistake of leaving my dough to prove on my UPS for way too long.
That's
It was
fantastic.
it was huge. It was like quadruple the size. It was crazy.
My gosh. So we've been at this now for a little over 3 hours. That I initially said, okay, we might usually go for, about 2 hours. And you said initially, okay, I'm going to have to go at this time. But then you're like, all right, things opened up. And
Yeah.
wow, that just time flies. Holy cow. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but before we go, I want to ask just a couple last questions. So for anyone in the chat who might not have been there earlier, because I realize I've been just so into this, and we thought of this so last minute that I haven't been spamming the command because I didn't set it up to be automated. But if you are here and a member of the mob army, you can put in the command Giga Monsters, Giga Undead, or Giga Creatures to get 10 points for your faction. So for anyone who's been around here, you are supporting your faction, and obviously thank you for tuning in. We thought of this like I came to Giga with this 15 minutes before we were gonna meet, so like less than an hour before the stream, and I was like, would it be cool if we did this? Is this okay? Like I'll take care of compiling everything for you. You don't need to worry about that. And so got the chat commands set up, but I forgot to have Streamlabs automate sending that. So there you go. If you've seen people spamming the chat, that's why that's happening. So as we start to wrap up, we are getting to the tail end of 2021. You mentioned that you started in February, and it's safe to say it's been a pretty good year for you so far.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Not to brag, I knew I would do well because I am just someone who is entertained and I'm used to this sort of thing. So I knew that I would do well from like a performance perspective of how I feel about how I'm doing. But numbers wise, you can never predict, right?
Yeah.
There's just no way, because a lot of it has to do with luck. It has to do with who you know, all those sorts of things. But on those ends, I've also done really well, which I was like, like I said, it's a toss up. You just don't know. So I've been really pleasantly surprised, especially recently. Yeah.
So as we get to the end of the year, do you have any goals that you want to accomplish before the end of 2021?
I haven't set any particular goals. I'm very much into data, into numbers, into statistics.
I can tell.
I'm very happy just looking back at my month-to-month view of how I'm doing and seeing the trend go up. Whether it's a lot or a little or what, just seeing the improvement is good, and seeing that honestly, I compare my stats to other people's stats who are similarly sized to me, and I see, am I performing the same as them? Are our trend lines kind of the same? Or am I doing better? Am I increasing faster than other people and things like that? So that's been good. I have been doing really well compared to some of my peers, and that's an important statistic for me to look at,
Yeah.
And it's not that like, oh, I have to do better than them, but it's, you have to compare to figure out like, am I doing something great, or
am I doing something wrong? That it's data points, that you're not comparing yourself to others in a sort of personal sense. Am I better than them? That you are literally just,
it's like just numbers,
just taking the numbers and saying, all right, in a scientific sense, how are things going?
Yeah. So I do that a lot to kind of see like, how are VTubers as a whole doing? And am I trending up more than, VTubers in general are, or are we all trending up at the same rate and I'm right in the middle of the pack, that sort of stuff. So I check a lot of this stuff because it's really important to me just understand, like, really realistically, how am I doing? And I've been doing really well, really well. There have been times where VTubers in general have dropped off in viewership or have stagnated and then got back up, and I've just been increasing through the whole thing. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really happy with that.
That's awesome. And I know that I suppose it's not a goal per se, but you do have your Z form on the horizon.
Yes. Yeah, I have. It's in the works, and we're in the art stage right now, very early in the art stage, so I don't really have like stuff I can show for the next while. And I'm not sure how much I want to show until it's done, to be honest. Maybe nothing,
Yeah,
maybe only a
totally
little bit,
fair.
not sure. Yeah, so we'll see. And I definitely can start like rigging as soon as the art's done. Like I have confirmation that when one thing gets done, I could pass it off to the next thing, and so
Yeah.
it's just a matter of how long the art takes.
Do you
So
foresee
we're
that
working on that
being
phase.
something that is finished in this calendar year, or do you think it's something more early 2022?
Think so. That's the original timeline that we were planning. That's the original timeline. So I think so, but I'm also not trying to restrict anything to any timeline because I want it to be
Yeah,
really
you
good.
want to do it right. That you
Yeah.
only get new models once in a blue moon. Like even the
Right. Right.
biggest VTubers out there only get new models a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to make sure, especially if it's something that
It's like
you're putting
perfect.
time, effort, finances into, that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it right. So obviously,
Yeah.
take all the time that you need and make sure the artist does the same. And
Right.
eh,
Yeah, and
yeah,
she also hasn't made models before. She's an artist. She's a really great artist, but she has not made models for anyone else. She made like a little test one for herself, so she's like mildly familiar with the process, and I've given her all of the resources I gathered on it. And she has help from other people that have made models as well. So there's no worry on if she'll be able to do it, but I am the first one. So I want to make sure that I give her a lot of time to make sure that, like, because when you draw just art of someone, it's very different from drawing art
creating
for a
something that
model.
is practical for a model. And
Yeah,
from the way you
preparing it
phrased
for that.
things earlier, it sounds like you're
Mhm.
going to do the rigging yourself.
No, 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 no. I have someone else to do the rigging. I won't mention who it is. I have revealed the mama to everyone so they know who that is, but
Yeah, that's
I
where the
have
Z
not
comes
revealed
from
who's
in Z
rigging.
form.
Yeah, 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 yeah. From Zan. Yeah, she truly is cracked. She's amazing. And she's someone whose art I've followed for a really long time, and she was one of the first people that ever did art of me that I ever commissioned. So I actually have art of
Mm,
me that she's drawn. Although it's not a teaser for the model. It's not how the model's gonna look. I'm just gonna say that now in case anyone goes back and looks at it. But she did draw like this form of me, a while back I want to say in like December maybe, a while back. So she was. I think that was like my first profile picture that was not just a picture of my model.
yeah, well, because you
Was
said you
that
started
art?
in February, so
Yeah, I've been
how
around
how
since
was it?
before then though. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I actually had the ability to stream as me since like November. I had
Mm,
everything set up, and there were just a few things that I was like trying to get done first, and I wanted to stream later. So yeah, so I was building up art and just using Twitter a lot in the meantime before I could actually start streaming. So I did that for months. So when I started streaming, I already had a little bit of a leg up that there were some people that already knew me. So I had kind of a good amount of initial support, definitely.
mm.
Yeah. But
And
yeah, I'm really excited for it, and thank you, Sneaky, for saying that's one of your favorites. I agree. I
mm,
agree.
and the last question I ask all of my guests is, what does being a VTuber mean to you? And that's not the definition of what is a VTuber, but to you, Giga, what is it to be a VTuber? And I've gotten all sorts of answers. None are right, none are wrong.
Yeah.
Some people have said it allows them to get in touch with their inner child, or it lets them
Mhm.
be someone that they can't be in everyday life. Poppy, on the other
Mhm.
hand, who is the leader of the stream team that you're on, we actually have gone
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
entire interview without actually mentioning the Wrecking Crew, which is the stream
Yeah.
team that you are on, led by Poppy the Lich King.
Mhm.
Um, he had a more clinical answer of uh, it's a tool that
Yes.
for him as a performer, it is a tool that he uses to channel
Mhm.
his energy and to
Right.
help bring more eyes to him. And that's perfectly valid as well. So
Yeah.
there's this sliding scale, and uh, it's always interesting to hear people's individual answers. So, to
Hmm.
you, General Giga, what does it mean to
Yeah.
be a VTuber?
There are a lot of things, but if I have to pick like one major thing, I would really agree with what Poppy said, but specifically, it is a medium to channel your true self through in a way that you can be a caricature of yourself, And I think that's the best use of it. Not everyone uses it that way, but I think if you're going to be successful and you're going to do it right, that's the way to do it. So, whatever you are or whoever you are, you need to create a character of that, right? Which is just a bigger, more condensed version of yourself. And then once you have that, that is the greatest tool to get people to understand you and what you're about. Because there is no other streamer where you click on their stream and you see them and you understand what they're about, what their personality is like, what their metaverse might be like just from looking at them. It does not happen at all. And you have that here. And that's the other thing that if I can add a second one, that's the other thing that it is a tool to create an entire metaverse that you would never, ever be able to create otherwise. Unless you were literally insane and you got people to believe that. If you were, a human being in front of the camera putting on an eye patch and a cape and being like, I am General GEEGA, no. No, it just wouldn't happen. But in this form, you can do that, and you can have fun with it, and you can get everyone involved with it, and you can be basically something that is just a huge extension of yourself that describes you better visually and initially than you ever could otherwise. That's my answer.
I always enjoy that question. I always have it last. And one thing I found, this is episode 35 of Vtuber Talk, which is kind of weird. But one thing that I enjoy about it and why I have kept it, because I've changed a couple things about my closing questions and how I run the show. But that is one question that has existed since show 1 that I have kept because I love the answers. And I always feel like I never feel like I can answer for a guest and know what they're going to say in advance. But as soon as their answer leaves their mouth, I sit back and from everything I know about them, from having seen their content before they were on the show and from having just spoken with them on the show, everyone's answer always makes sense for them. That for you, that I get the general idea that you are General GEEGA IRL for the most part. Not the same that this is you through a slightly cranked up lens, but that, like you said, you're not going to play a game just because it is the meta. You're going to play a game because it's the meta and because you enjoy it. And then the idea of, as you put it, cultivating your metaverse, that in this case, that's the mob army. That is just for some people, it's just a community, but for you and for your metaverse, that it is the factions, the points, the ideas of all the different challenges and all the different ideas that you have going forward. So, you having that addition, as soon as you start saying it, was like, oh yeah, makes sense, makes perfect sense. So that's super cool. I always love hearing stuff like that. This has been so much fun, honestly, and I hope you had a good time as well.
I did, absolutely.
Awesome. That's really for me, that I started the show on the selfish quest to keep myself entertained, but at the same time, I wanted to be able to entertain others and specifically be able to entertain my guests and to make sure that people who come on my show have a good time and have a good experience. And I hope I've been able to provide that for you and certainly for your community as well. Last chance, everybody, if you are part of the mob army, to get some points. Let me just points. There we go.
Your handy dandy command.
Yes. So last couple chances to get that in. Let me see. There were a couple of follows that I missed earlier. Numbnuts 00 and the Shiroi Ice, and I think I got the other. So if you aren't already following General GEEGA, be sure to follow her. Oh, Brohelms, thank you very much. Be sure to follow her. The links are right down there in the description, or not description, on the bottom chyron for both Twitch and Twitter. Your next stream is on Sunday, I believe?
Yes, Sunday, 3 p.m. EST.
Awesome. So do be sure to follow her. Follow me here and on Twitter if you feel so inclined. I do VTuber interviews one every weekend. And actually tonight we are going to be rating Poppy Fubar because he is actually being interviewed by Domo. So that's super fun. That was just announced this afternoon. And honestly, I was super happy for him. And I was just like, oh, thank goodness it doesn't completely overlap. That they started about 2 hours in. So they've been going for about an hour and a half now. So we'll be joining them a little bit in. But again, thank you all so much for stopping by. Giga, thank you. I'm going to be doing an outro and then sending us on over to Domo.
Yep.
But just honestly, sincerely, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you had a great time. And until next time, take it easy, everybody.
Bye bye.